So hey, what's up guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. So in this video we are going to see what if Harry Potter was Odin's son and inherited dormant Norse runic powers. So this will be movie, and don't worry, I will be not hosting the whole video, so you can skip the intro. And if you are new on this channel, then please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget to watch till end, and you can give me feedback on this video so I can improve for the next videos.
The night didn't feel like winter. Winter in Godric's Hollow usually came with honest things, brittle grass, chimney smoke, quiet lanes where even the wind sounded polite. But tonight the cold had teeth. It pressed against the cottage windows like a hand, trying to remember how to knock. Inside, Lily Potter was already awake. Not because Harry cried, he wasn't. That was the strange part. The baby monitor hissed softly, and upstairs, her son slept with the kind of peace Lily didn't trust anymore. It was too still, as if the whole house was holding its breath. James stood at the small living room window, wand loose in his hand, staring out into the dark garden. His shoulders were set like he was bracing for a punch he couldn't see coming. "You feel it too," Lily whispered. James didn't turn, but his voice came out steady anyway. "Yeah." Lily's fingers tightened around her own wand. It felt ridiculous, a thin piece of wood, and hope when every story they'd heard lately ended the same way. People vanished. Homes became ash. Names were whispered like curses. James finally turned, and for a heartbeat Lily saw it. Fear, raw and unmasked, flickering behind the brave face he always put on for her. "You shouldn't know," James said. "Not here." "He does know," Lily replied, because pretending had stopped working weeks ago. The lamp on the side table gave a small tremor in its light. Not a flicker, a tremor, like reality had shivered. Lily's breath caught. "James, the wards." James's eyes darted to the door. The cottage was warded, layered with protections and old family charms, strengthened by Dumbledore himself. There should have been warning signs, pressure, heat, the sensation of someone pushing at the boundary. Instead, there was silence. And then, the wards didn't break. They unhooked. Lily felt it like a stitch being pulled out in one smooth motion. James lunged for Harry's room. Lily followed. They reached the staircase just as the front door opened. Not slammed, not blasted. Opened. A gust of cold poured in, carrying the smell of damp earth and something sharper metal, like blood on a blade. Footsteps on the wooden floor. Slow, certain, like the house belonged to whoever walked in. James spun at the base of the stairs, wand up. "You." The man in the doorway didn't hurry. Lord Voldemort stepped into the light like he was stepping onto a stage. His pale face looked wrong in the warm glow of the cottage, too smooth, too sure, too detached from ordinary human rules. His eyes swept over the room, and when they landed on Lily, it was like being pinned to a board. "James Potter," Voldemort said, voice soft as silk sliding over a knife. "How obedient you've been, hiding where I told you you were hiding." James's jaw tightened. "You're not touching my family." Voldemort's gaze shifted, almost bored. "You were always loud, James." Lily's mind raced. Stall. Distract. Move Harry. Her body moved before her thoughts finished. She backed up one step, then another, toward stairs. Voldemort's eyes followed her. "No," he said, not loud, not angry, just final. "Stay." The word hit Lily like a weight. Her knees wanted to fold. Her lungs wanted to stop. It wasn't imperious. It was worse. It was as if the universe had briefly agreed with him. James snarled and fired first a streak of bright light slicing through the air. Voldemort didn't even raise his wand properly. A lazy twist of his wrist, and James's spell shattered against an invisible wall like glass against stone. The fragments of magic didn't vanish. They fell like sparks falling to the floor and dying. James stared, a fraction of disbelief flashing across his face. Lily saw her opening. "Harry," she screamed, and bolted upstairs. Behind her, James shouted something a spell, maybe, or her name, or both, and then she heard the sound that made her blood turn to ice. A body hitting the floor. Lily didn't look back. She took the stairs two at a time, heart clawing at her ribs, and burst into Harry's room. Moonlight spilled across the crib. Harry's small fist was tucked under his cheek. He looked so normal it hurt. "Harry," Lily whispered, scooping him up. He stirred, blinking, and for a tiny moment his green eyes met hers. Not afraid, just curious, like he'd been waiting. Lily pressed her forehead to his and tried to pour everything she'd ever loved into that single touch. "Mummy's here. Mummy's got you." Footsteps on the stairs. Slow, unrushed. Coming for them. Lily spun, wand up, Harry on her hip. Her mind tore through spell shields, stunners, anything but nothing felt big enough. Voldemort was a storm, and she was holding an umbrella. He appeared in the doorway. Framed by the hallway light, he looked almost calm, like this was a chore, like killing an infant was paperwork. Lily's voice cracked. "Please, take me, kill me, just not him." Voldemort's expression didn't change. Stunned aside. Lily's grip on Harry tightened. "No." The air shifted. It wasn't a gust. It was the sensation of a great thing turning its head in the dark. For a split second, Lily felt heard, in a way that had nothing to do with ears something like distant wings. Voldemort lifted his wand. Avada Kedavra. Green light erupted. Lily's world narrowed to that flash, that curse tearing across the room toward her son. She threw herself forward. Not with the spell, with her body, with her life. The curse struck, and something impossible happened. There was no explosion, no ricochet, no dramatic burst of power that sent Voldemort flying. The killing curse hit Harry's skin and hesitated. Like a sentence hitting a punctuation mark it didn't understand. For the barest heartbeat, Lily saw symbols flare across Harry's chest, not words, not letters, angular shapes that burned with pale gold light. Runes. They weren't like the neat, academic scratches in old books. These looked alive, old, hungry, as if someone had taken the idea of law and carved it into light. The green curse flickered. Then it didn't rebound. It didn't hit a shield and bounce. It simply ceased, as if the universe had read the curse, frowned, and deleted it. A quiet thunk of displaced air, like a door gently closing. Voldemort's eyes widened. For the first time, he looked startled. Lily couldn't breathe. Harry didn't cry. He stared at Voldemort, calm as a lake, and Lily swore she saw the pale gold runes under his skin shifting like embers under ash. Voldemort's face twisted not fear, exactly, but offense. Like reality had embarrassed him. He raised his wand again. Lily moved without thinking. She shoved Harry behind her shoulder, putting herself between them like a wall. And oh, Lily screamed, and hurled every ounce of herself into a protective charm she didn't even fully form. Not because it was the right spell, because it was the only thing she had. Voldemort's wand flashed again, and this time the curse hit Lily. There was a sound then, not an explosion, a sharp, cutting silence. Lily fell. As she dropped, her fingers brushed Harry's cheek. She felt his warmth. She felt the runes flare again, bigger like a net unfolding. And then, her world went dark. Far away, beyond the cottage and the village and the small mortal distance of roads and hills, something ancient stirred. A storm cloud formed in a clear sky, and for a moment, lightning traced a shape that wasn't random. An eye, watching. When Hagrid arrived, the house was already wrong. He expected rubble violence usually announced itself with broken beams and smoke. But Godric's Hollow's little cottage looked softened, like it had melted and refrozen. The stones along the wall had warped slightly, as if they'd been warmed from within. Hagrid lumbered through the broken doorway, shoulders hunched, rain dotting his coat even though the sky above was dry. "James?" he called, voice thick. Lily? Silence answered him. His boots crunched on something brittle. Not glass. Ash. He found James first at the base of the stairs. One glance told Hagrid what he already knew. His big hands shook as he reached out, then pulled back like touching would make it real. Ah, James, Hagrid whispered, and his voice broke. Upstairs, a faint sound. A soft baby gurgle. Hagrid climbed, steps heavy as if the stairs were trying to hold him back. He reached the nursery. Lily lay on the floor near the crib, red hair spread like spilled sunlight, eyes open but seeing nothing. Her wand had rolled under the rocking chair. And Harry? Harry sat in his crib like nothing had happened. A baby in pajamas, cheeks flushed with sleep. On his forehead, just above his right brow, was a thin, fresh mark, a cut shaped not like a lightning bolt yet, but like a small, jagged line. Raw. New. Hagrid's breath shuddered out. You're alive, he breathed, like he couldn't believe the words could exist. Harry looked at him and smiled. And for a second, Hagrid saw it. A faint glow beneath the child's skin, not green like curses, not blue like charms, but a soft, pale gold that faded the moment Hagrid blinked. Hagrid swallowed hard, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and reached in carefully. As his fingers touched Harry's pajama shirt, something prickled at his skin, like touching the edge of a ward. Not a Hogwarts ward. Older. Stranger. He lifted Harry, cradling him like something sacred, and backed out of the room with the kind of care he usually reserved for dragon eggs. Outside, in the yard, someone was already waiting. A tall figure in long robes, silver beard damp with dew, eyes sharp behind half-moon spectacles. Albus Dumbledore. He didn't speak at first. His gaze swept over the house, not just the broken door and warped stone, but the air itself, as if he could read the echoes left behind. Then he looked at Harry, and the twinkle in his eyes vanished. What happened here, Dumbledore said softly, is not only Voldemort's work. Hagrid clutched Harry tighter. Professor, it was him. It was you-know-who. I saw the mark in the sky. I know, Dumbledore interrupted gently. His voice was calm, but his hand trembled slightly as it lifted, fingers hovering near Harry's forehead without touching. I know who came. His eyes narrowed, but I do not know what answered. Hagrid frowned. Answered? Dumbledore's gaze slid to the cottage wall, where a portion of stone near the nursery window looked scorched. Not burned like fire. Burned like meaning. Carved into the blackened stone was a single symbol, angular and clean, as if it had been pressed into reality by a stamp. A rune. Dumbledore stared at it for a long time. Then he whispered, almost to himself, a law. Hagrid shifted uneasily. It's just a mark, innit? Dumbledore finally looked away from the wall and down at Harry again. The baby yawned, tiny fingers grabbing at Dumbledore's robe sleeve when the headmaster stepped closer. The gesture was normal, human. But when Harry's fingers brushed the fabric, Dumbledore's pupils tightened. Because for the briefest moment, he felt it. Not a spell, not a charm, a rule. A boundary drawn so deep it sat under magic itself. Dumbledore stepped back like he'd touched a hidden blade. Albus? Hagrid asked, voice small for someone his size. What is it? Dumbledore's eyes went distant, as if scanning a library only he could see. Ancient runes, he murmured. Older than Hogwarts. Older than Britain's wandcraft. Something northern. Something. He stopped. Because the air behind them shifted again, the same subtle sensation Lily had felt, a great attention passing over the world. A raven landed on the fence post. Not unusual in itself. But it stared at Harry with an intelligence that made Hagrid's skin crawl. One eye was dark as coal. The other was pale, almost silver, catching the light like a coin. Dumbledore's gaze locked onto the bird. The raven didn't caw. It simply watched. And then, with a slow, deliberate beat of its wings, it lifted off into the night. Dumbledore's mouth went dry. He turned back to Hagrid, voice carefully controlled. Take him. Hagrid blinked. What? Take Harry, Dumbledore repeated, firmer. Away from here. Now. Hagrid hesitated. Where? Dumbledore looked toward the road, toward the world that would soon be shouting Harry's name. His eyes, for once, looked tired. Somewhere hidden, he said quietly. Somewhere small. Somewhere the old powers won't think to look. Hagrid didn't understand, not fully, but he trusted Dumbledore the way you trust gravity. He nodded once. I'll do it. He turned, holding Harry close, and began walking toward the waiting motorbike. Dumbledore stayed behind, staring at the rune burned into the cottage stone. He raised his wand and traced the symbol carefully in the air. It didn't respond like normal magic. It didn't flare or crackle. It simply stood there, solid as an idea, a quiet warning carved into the world. Dumbledore lowered his wand slowly, and in a voice no one else heard, he whispered, Whose son are you, Harry? Above, the clouds shifted, and far away, thunder answered not with sound, but with inevitability. As if the universe had decided, tonight, to remember a forgotten saga. Privet Drive loved rules. It loved straight hedges, straight backs, straight faces. It loved lawns trimmed to the same length and curtains drawn to the same inch. It loved the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, the kind that was enforced. Number 4 sat in the middle of it like a crowned jewel of normal. Petunia Dursley used to think that if you kept everything tidy enough, life would behave. Then Albus Dumbledore left a baby on her doorstep, and the world began to bend. The first thing Petunia noticed was not Harry's scar. It was the cold. She opened the front door that morning expecting the bite of winter air and the paper-thin excuse of a letter on the doorstep. Instead, she felt something older, a chill that slid under her skin like a finger tracing a line. She looked down. A basket. A baby. Petunia's mouth went dry, so fast it hurt. For one hysterical moment, she thought it must be a prank, James Potter's idea of humor, perhaps. But no prank came with that scar, and no prank made the world feel like it was watching. Her eyes snapped to the letter. She read it once. Then again. Then a third time, because her brain refused to accept the words. Your sister is dead, her son must live here, you must keep him safe. Petunia's hands began to shake. She glanced up and down the street. Curtains twitched in neighboring houses. Someone was always peeking. And then she felt it again, that strange pressure, like the air had tightened around a house. Not a sound, not a movement. A boundary. Petunia swallowed and scooped the baby up with stiff arms, as if he might explode. Harry's eyes opened. Green. Lily's eyes. Petunia's chest seized. A sharp, ugly ache rose in her throat. For a second she saw Lily at 17, laughing in the sun, hair a wild red halo, and Petunia hated her all over again for being special so easily. Then she saw the scar, and fear drowned everything else. Because the scar wasn't just a mark. It was a statement. This child survived something the world does not understand. Petunia stumbled inside, slammed the door, and locked it. The lock clicked, and then clicked again. She frowned, fingers still on the knob. Had she double-locked it? She tried to unlock it. It didn't budge. She tried again, harder. Nothing. A prickling sensation crawled up her arms. Petunia yanked at the handle, heart climbing into her throat. Then, as suddenly as it had happened, the lock turned easily. Petunia froze. Harry blinked at her, calm, as if nothing was strange. Petunia's breath came out in a shaky hiss. She looked at the baby, and for the first time, the thought struck her with cold clarity. This isn't just Lily's child. This is something else. Vernon Dursley took one look at Harry and decided the solution was obvious. We'll send him back, Vernon declared, face blotchy with outrage. We'll tell whoever left him here that we're not running a charity for abnormality. Petunia didn't argue. Not because she agreed, because she didn't want to speak. She kept thinking about the door lock clicking twice, about the boundary in the air, about the way the cold had felt like an eye-opening. Vernon snatched up the letter and stormed back toward the front door. He yanked it open, stepped out, and stopped dead. Petunia hovered behind him, peering over his shoulder. The street looked normal, but the space in front of their doorstep didn't. It was subtle. If you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't see it at all. But Petunia saw it. A faint shimmer like heat haze, only the air was cold. Vernon snorted. "What is that? Fog?" He marched forward. His shoe hit the edge of the shimmer, and he bounced. Not fell, not stumbled. Bounced. Like an invisible wall had politely rejected him. Vernon stared down at his foot, confused and offended, as if reality had insulted him personally. He tried again. Same result. His foot slid forward, touched the boundary, and sprang back. Vernon's face turned purple. Petunia. Petunia's mouth was too dry to answer. She looked down at Harry in her arms. The baby gurgled softly, and for the briefest heartbeat, Petunia saw a pale gold flicker beneath his skin as if tiny glowing scratches were moving like embers. Petunia's grip tightened. Her voice came out thin. "Vernon, come inside." Vernon huffed. "This is ridiculous." He turned to march back in. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the shimmer vanished. Like it had never been there. Vernon blinked. "What?" Petunia shut the door, locking it with hands that barely obeyed her. Vernon spun toward her. "Explain." Petunia swallowed hard, forcing her spine straight the way she always had when Lily made her feel small. "I can't," Petunia said, and then, because fear makes people honest in ugly ways, she added, "But we are not sending him anywhere." Vernon's eyes bulged. "Petunia." Petunia's fingers dug into Harry's blanket. "There are people things who would come for him." That letter said. Vernon cut her off. "I don't care what the letter said, I care what I say, and I say this child is not." Harry sneezed. A tiny, harmless baby sneeze. The light bulb in the hallway popped. Vernon yelped and jumped back like the bulb had attacked him. Petunia froze. Harry stared at the ceiling with mild interest. Vernon's mouth opened and closed twice, like a fish. Petunia whispered, barely audible, "That's what I'm afraid of." They never spoke of it again in any kind way. That was the Dursleys' great talent, ignoring the screaming truth in the room until it suffocated everything else. Harry grew, and the house began to learn him. At first, it was small. A cupboard latch that refused to open when Vernon was particularly angry. A cabinet door that gently swung shut when Petunia tried to reach for the frying pan too fast. A dropped glass that didn't shatter, it landed softly, as if the floor had decided to be forgiving. Petunia told herself it was coincidence. She told herself the latch was old. She told herself the glass was thick. She told herself a lot of things, because if she didn't, she'd have to admit what her bones already knew. Harry's presence was changing the rules. When Harry was 4, he drew his first knot. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in June, the sort of afternoon privet drive considered sacred. The sun was bright. The grass was clipped. Dudley was playing in the garden, roaring like a lion and pretending to hunt imaginary prey. Harry sat on the back step with a blunt pencil Petunia had given him, mostly to keep him quiet. He wasn't allowed crayons because crayons made mess, and mess was one of the Dursleys' few true fears. Harry stared at the pencil, as if he wasn't sure what it was for. Then, slowly, he began to draw on the concrete step. Not a picture, not a stick figure. A shape. Angular. Simple. A line splitting into two, like a forked path. Petunia saw it out of the corner of her eye and snapped, "Don't scribble on the step, boy." Harry flinched, pencil pausing. But the shape was already there. Petunia didn't know why she did it. Curiosity, maybe, or that prickling fear again, but she stepped closer. She looked down at the mark. It wasn't chalky gray like pencil lead should be on stone. It looked darker, set in, as if the concrete had accepted it. Petunia's skin crawled. "What is that?" she demanded. Harry looked up at her, eyes too steady for a 4-year-old. "It's a stop." Petunia's stomach flipped. "A stop?" Harry nodded, as if that made perfect sense. "So Dudley won't come here." Petunia frowned. "Dudley doesn't." Dudley charged toward them mid-roar, waving a toy sword. "I'm gonna get you." He aimed straight for Harry. And then, right as Dudley's foot hit the edge of the drawn symbol, he tripped. Not on a rock, not on grass, on nothing. His legs tangled under him, as if an invisible hand had caught his ankle. Dudley face-planted into the lawn with a squeal of outrage. Harry blinked. Petunia's heart slammed against her ribs. Dudley sat up, wailing, and Petunia rushed forward on instinct. "Dudikin's own, my poor." Vernon thundered out the back door. "What's all this noise?" Dudley pointed at Harry, fat finger shaking. "He did it." Vernon's face darkened. He strode toward Harry like a storm cloud with legs. Harry shrank back, pressed against the step. Vernon reached for him, and his hand stopped midair. Not because he chose to, because it couldn't move farther. Vernon's fingers splayed, straining against something unseen. His face reddened with effort. Petunia stared at Vernon's frozen hand, then down at the symbol on the step. The forked line. The stop. Vernon snarled and yanked his arm back, stumbling a step. What is? Harry's eyes were wide now, fear and confusion mixing. "I didn't mean." Vernon's gaze dropped to the symbol. His lip curled like he'd smelled rot. He raised his foot and stamped down hard on the drawing. The pencil mark smeared, but the shape didn't disappear. For a heartbeat, pale gold light flared under Vernon's shoe, and he yelped, hopping back as if he'd stepped on a hot stove. His sock smoked slightly. Petunia's breath caught. Vernon stared at Harry with a new kind of anger. Not just disgust. Not just hatred. Fear. Inside, Vernon snapped. "Now." Petunia scooped Dudley up and hurried him in. Vernon grabbed Harry's arm. This time it worked, like the house allowed it, and dragged him through the kitchen toward the cupboard under the stairs. Harry didn't fight. He never did. He just looked back once, eyes darting toward the back step, toward the stubborn little symbol still etched in the concrete like a scar. As if he didn't understand why the world obeyed him. The cupboard became Harry's world. It smelled of dust and old shoes, and the air was always too warm in summer, too cold in winter. Vernon liked it, that way, discomfort as punishment, punishment as comfort. But the cupboard had rules too, and the strangest thing was that sometimes the cupboard didn't want to be cruel. The first time it happened, Harry was 6. He'd been shoved inside for tracking mud when Dudley had pushed him into a puddle. The door slammed. The lock clicked. Harry sat in the dark, knees pulled to his chest, listening to Dudley's laughter upstairs. He didn't cry. Not because he was brave. Because crying didn't change anything. He stared at the darkness until his eyes began to sting. And then he felt that pressure again. That boundary sensation. Like air thickening. Harry frowned and reached out, fingers brushing the underside of the stairs. His nail caught on something. A roughness. He scraped at it and found a tiny chip of wood, splintered. Without thinking, he traced a shape with his fingertip. A simple angled line. Then another. His finger moved like it already knew where to go. As he finished the shape, the air inside the cupboard shifted. Not warmer. Not brighter. Just steadier. Harry let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For the first time in his life, inside that cupboard, he felt safe. He blinked. The darkness seemed less heavy. He leaned his head back against the wall, and for the first time in days, he fell asleep quickly. Upstairs, Petunia woke in the middle of the night with a jolt. She didn't know why. The house was quiet. Vernon snored. Dudley murmured in his sleep. But Petunia's heart hammered, and her mouth tasted like fear. She slipped out of bed and padded down the stairs, drawn like a moth toward a flame she hated. She stopped at the cupboard door. The air around it felt wrong. Not cold. Not hot. Just charged, like the space before a storm breaks. Petunia reached out and touched the doorknob. It was warm. Petunia snatched her hand back, shaking. Then, slowly, she leaned closer and listened. Inside the cupboard, there was no sobbing. No scratching. No desperate little breaths. There was only a soft, even sound. Harry sleeping. Petunia stared at the door. Something in her cracked, not into kindness, but into something uglier. Resentment. Because even locked away, even punished, even unwanted, Harry's existence still forced the world to adapt. Petunia whispered, her voice barely there, "Stop it." The doorknob cooled. The charged air faded. And Petunia fled back upstairs like she was running from a ghost. By the time Harry was 10, the rules around him were stronger. So strong that the Dursleys learned to avoid triggering him. They didn't understand it, but they learned patterns the way animals learn where traps are. If Vernon hit too hard, his arm would go numb. If Petunia tried to lock Harry in the cupboard for too long, the lock would jam and refuse to turn. If Dudley chased Harry too far, he'd trip, or a garden hose would writhe like a snake under his feet. The Dursleys didn't call it magic. They called it freakishness because naming something makes it real, and they didn't want this real. Harry did not know what it was either. He only knew one thing. When he was frightened enough, the world sometimes listened. And that terrified him more than any cupboard. Because if the world listened, what would happen if he ever got angry? The summer before Hogwarts arrived like a hell breath. It began with the smallest sign, an owl perched on a street lamp outside number 4. Petunia saw it first through the window and felt her stomach drop. Owls didn't sit in the daytime like that. Not unless something unnatural was happening. She slammed the curtains shut, hands shaking. Vernon lumbered over, scowling. "What is it now?" Petunia whispered, "It's starting." Vernon scoffed. "What's starting?" Petunia didn't answer. She didn't have to, because at that exact moment, the mail slot in the front door rattled. Once. Twice. Then a thick envelope slid through, landing on the doormat with a soft thump. Harry, sitting at the kitchen table quietly peeling potatoes, looked up. The envelope was addressed in green ink. Mr. H., Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet, Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Harry stared at it like it might bite. Vernon stared at it like it had. Petunia made a small choking sound. And Harry felt the air change. Not like a storm this time. Like a door unlocking somewhere deep in the world. The boundary around the house pulsed once. A faint shimmer. And for a second, right under Harry's skin, pale gold runes flickered like waking embers. Harry didn't know why, but he suddenly thought of a word he'd never learned. Not English. Not anything he'd ever heard. A name that felt like iron and sky. Asgard. Harry's fingers twitched toward the letter. Vernon lunged to snatch it first. Harry's hand closed on it at the same time. For a heartbeat, the kitchen went utterly still. And then the paper warmed in Harry's palm. Not burning. Not hurting. Like it recognized him. Like it had been waiting. Harry looked up at Vernon, confused. Vernon yanked back. The letter stayed in Harry's hand. Vernon yanked harder. The letter did not move. Vernon's face went crimson. "Give me that." Harry swallowed. "It's for me." Vernon bared his teeth. "Nothing is for you." He grabbed Harry's wrist. And the moment his fingers tightened, the cupboard lock upstairs clicked. Once. Twice. A sound like a warning. Vernon froze. Petunia's breath hitched. Harry stared at Vernon's hand on his wrist, and he felt that the old law under his skin, tightening like a knot. Not to hurt, to protect. Vernon slowly let go. The tension in the air eased. The cupboard lock went silent. Harry held the letter like it was the first thing that had ever belonged to him. Outside, the owl on the street lamp blinked slowly, unbothered. And somewhere far beyond Privet Drive, beyond England, beyond the small, safe lie of normal, something ancient watched the door crack open. Vernon Dursley declared war on paper. It started with one letter, then two, then five, then so many that Petunia swore she heard the front door gulp when the mail slot opened, like it was choking on the sheer audacity of it. Every envelope was the same, thick, cream parchment, green ink, Harry's name written like whoever held the quill was smiling. Vernon tried reason first. He burned the letter in the fireplace. The parchment didn't catch immediately. It curled at the edges, resisting, like it didn't appreciate being told no. When it finally burned, the ashes didn't drift up with the heat. They fell straight down, heavy, as if the words had weight even after death. Vernon stared at the ashes and muttered, "Not normal." Petunia didn't answer, because her throat had tightened around a truth she didn't want to swallow. Harry sat at the table, peeling potatoes like he'd been taught, and watched the ashes fall with a quiet, hungry curiosity. He hadn't opened a single letter. Not because he didn't want to, because the Dursleys made sure he didn't get the chance. By the 5th day, Vernon was shouting at the postman. By the 7th, he was shouting at the air. By the 10th, he was shouting at Harry. "It's you," Vernon bellowed, jabbing a sausage-thick finger at the boy. "You're doing this whatever freak thing you are, you're making it happen." Harry flinched instinctively, shoulders drawing in. But something else happened too. The air in the kitchen tightened. Not like a storm, like a rule being remembered. The cupboard lock upstairs clicked. Once. Twice. Vernon's face went pale, and for a moment he looked less like an angry man and more like a man standing too close to a cliff edge. Petunia swallowed, eyes darting to the ceiling like the house itself might be listening. Harry stared down at his hands. He hadn't meant to do anything. That was the problem. Vernon's solution, as always, was to flee. "Pack," he snapped, voice cracked with panic. "We're leaving, we're going somewhere. They can't find us." "Who?" Petunia whispered. Vernon ignored her. He always did when she asked questions that made him feel small. They drove, and drove, and drove. They stopped for petrol, for Dudley to complain, for Petunia to stare at Harry like he might suddenly sprout horns. Every time they stopped, the letters found them anyway. In the car's windshield wipers, stuffed through the gaps in the doors, waiting neatly on the dashboard like they'd been placed there by a polite ghost. Vernon's hands began to shake on the steering wheel. Harry sat in the back seat, quiet as always, and watched the envelopes appear with the same eerie calm he'd had in the cupboard. It felt familiar, like the world doing what it wanted, regardless of Vernon Dursley. They ended up on a miserable little rock of an island, in a miserable little hut that looked like it had given up years ago. The wind screamed outside. The rain hammered the roof like fists. Vernon nailed the door shut and paced in circles, muttering about lunatics and freaks and how he wasn't going to let. Harry sat on the floor by the fireplace, knees drawn up, feeling the hut's thin walls and thin safety. He didn't know why, but the air here felt different. Less controlled. More open. Like a place where an old thing could slip through without anyone noticing. And deep under his skin, something warm stirred. Like embers beneath ash. Harry pressed his palm to his chest. For a split second, he thought he felt it. On night. Tied tight. Holding something in. Then, boom. The door exploded inward. Not burned. Not shattered. Just removed from the doorway by raw, unapologetic force. Vernon screamed. Petunia shrieked. Dudley made a sound like a pig being stepped on. Harry didn't move. A giant filled the doorway, framed by stormlight. Hair like a black tangle, beard like a nest, coat dripping seawater like he'd wrestled the ocean and won. He stepped in, ducking to fit. Sorry about that, the giant rumbled, as if breaking doors was a mild social mistake. Couldn't get the blasted thing open proper. His eyes, surprisingly kind, landed on Harry. And softened. "Harry?" he said gently. Harry stood because something in that voice made his spine straighten on its own. "Yes," Harry said, and his voice came out smaller than he wanted. The giant smiled like the world finally made sense. "Blimey," he whispered, "you look just like your mom." Vernon found his voice, squeaky with fury. "I demand you leave at once, I demand." The giant turned his head slowly toward Vernon. The temperature in the room dropped. Not cold like winter, cold like mountain stone. "I'm Hagrid," the giant said, voice low. "Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts." Vernon blinked, uncomprehending. What?" "Hogwarts," Hagrid repeated, as if the word was a key. Harry felt it in his bones. Hogwarts. A place. A doorway. Hagrid pulled something out of his coat. Another thick envelope, perfectly dry despite the rain, addressed in green ink. He held it out to Harry like it was sacred. "This is fair, you," Hagrid said. Harry took it. The parchment warmed in his hand. Not burning. Not hurting. Like it recognized him. Vernon lunged, face red. "Give me that." Hagrid's eyes narrowed. Now. Vernon froze mid-step, like the air had turned solid in front of him. Harry looked down at the envelope. His fingers trembled as he opened it. The paper inside was crisp, official, and impossible. Hagrid cleared his throat and awkwardly held out the letter like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Go on then," he said softly. "Read it." Harry's fingers fumbled with the parchment. The moment he unfolded it, the paper settled in his hands, as if it liked being there. The words didn't swim or blur. They sat neat and sharp, like they'd been waiting his whole life. It was an acceptance letter. A school. A real one. Not the ugly public one Petunia had once threatened him with. The one Vernon described like a prison full of bad manners and worse haircuts. This was different. This sounded impossible. Harry read it twice, silently, just to make sure his brain wasn't making it up. Then he looked up at Hagrid, voice small and cracked at the edges. I'm a wizard?" Hagrid's face did something tender, like relief. "Of course, YR," he said, like Harry had asked if the sky was blue. "And a thumping good one, I'd wager. Once Harry taught proper." Vernon found his anger again, as if it was the only thing keeping him upright. "He is not," Vernon snapped. "He will not be going to some institution." Hagrid turned slowly. The hut seemed to shrink around him. "He will," Hagrid said, calm as a mountain, "because it's his right." "It's my house," Vernon squealed. Hagrid blinked once. "No," he said, and it wasn't loud, but it was the kind of no that shut doors in your soul. "It's a hut Yeri squatted in, and that's Harry Potter." Petunia's lips trembled. "That name don't say that name," she hissed, like it tasted bitter. Harry's stomach dropped. "Potter," he repeated, tasting it for the first time like it could mean something. "So my mom and dad." Hagrid's expression shifted. The warmth didn't vanish, but it dimmed under something heavy. "Aye," he said gently. "Lily and James. Good people. Brave." Harry swallowed. His throat felt too tight to speak properly. "They died?" Hagrid nodded, slow. "Aye." Harry's eyes stung. It wasn't like he hadn't known. The Dursleys had never lied about that part, they just told it like it was a nuisance. Like Harry had been dropped on their doorstep the way you drop off a broken appliance. But hearing it from someone who said their names like they mattered, it hurt in a different way. Vernon tried to stomp the conversation back into shape. "Enough, he's not going anywhere. And he jabbed a finger at Hagrid. "You are leaving." Hagrid stared at Vernon for a long moment. Then his gaze flicked to Harry, and his voice softened again. "You got no idea what's waiting for ya," Hagrid said, "but it's better than this." Harry looked at his hands. His fingernails were dirty from peeling potatoes. His knuckles were scuffed. He felt small. And yet, under his skin, something warm shifted like embers breathing. Like the world hearing Hogwarts and going, "Ah, that." Vernon made a strangled sound and stepped forward, like he was going to physically remove the letter from Harry's hands by force. Hagrid's patience snapped. "Right," Hagrid said, very calmly. "I've been polite. But you've been dreadful." He drew an umbrella from inside his coat. It was pink. It was ridiculous. And somehow that made it worse. Vernon stared at it like it was an insult. "You can't do." Hagrid flicked the umbrella. There was a flash, only not quite like a normal flash. It wasn't bright. It was sharp, like a line being cut through the air. Dudley, who'd been trying to hide behind Petunia's skirt, let out a squeal. And then there was a strange thunk sound, like something trying to become real and failing halfway. Dudley clapped his hands to his backside and howled. Vernon's face went gray. "What did you do?" Hagrid blinked, looking faintly guilty. "Air. Meant to turn him into a pig," he muttered. "But well, close enough." Dudley wailed louder. Petunia shrieked and dragged him back as if he'd been set on fire. Harry stared, stunned. It was magic. Real magic. He couldn't decide if he was thrilled or terrified. Then he felt it again deep in his chest. A tightening. Oh no. Not anger. Not fear. A rule. And in the same instant, Dudley's wailing stumbled, like someone had pressed pause. He didn't stop crying, he just hiccuped, confused, as if the pain had been forced into a smaller box. Hagrid frowned and glanced at Harry, eyes narrowing in a curious way. Harry's heart thumped. He hadn't waved anything, hadn't said anything. But the air had listened. Hagrid didn't ask. Not yet. He just turned back to Vernon with a look that said he'd already decided Vernon Dursley wasn't worth the effort. "Pack your things," Hagrid said. "We're going tomorrow. Early." "Where?" Harry asked. Hagrid's grin returned, enormous and bright. "Diagon Alley." The words rang in Harry's bones like a bell. The Leaky Cauldron. They took a train back from the sea, then a bus, then walked through London until Harry's feet ached and his head buzzed with the kind of excitement that made everything feel too sharp. Hagrid kept him close, like he was worried Harry might vanish if he blinked. London was loud, dirty, alive. People shoved and swore and hurried like they were late to the end of the world. Harry had never felt so invisible. And then, suddenly, Hagrid stopped in front of a grimy little pub squeezed between a bookshop and a record store. The sign above the door read, "The Leaky Cauldron." It looked ordinary. Harry blinked at it. "This is it." Hagrid chuckled. "Aye, muggles don't see it proper. Come on." The moment Harry stepped across the threshold, the air changed. It was still London, still warm and crowded, but something underneath it shifted, like he'd stepped into a room where everyone knew a secret. Conversations dipped. Heads turned. A few people gasped. A witch in a bright green hat dropped her drink. Then the whispers came, like wind through dry leaves. "Is that Harry Potter? Blimey, that scar? No, it can't be. It is." Harry froze, heat rushing to his cheeks. He didn't understand. People stared at him like he was famous, like he was a story that had walked into the room. Hagrid boomed happily, slapping backs and greeting strangers like he owned the place. "All right," Tommy called the bald man behind the bar. "Got Harry with me." Tom's face split into a smile, so wide it looked painful. "Bless my soul," Tom breathed, leaning over the counter. "Harry Potter, an honor." Harry's mouth opened and closed uselessly. "Hello," he managed. The word sounded pathetic in the face of all that attention. Someone grabbed Harry's hand and shook it vigorously. Someone else patted his shoulder. Someone tried to lean in and look at his scar more closely, like it was a museum exhibit. Harry felt small again. And then under his skin, the embers shifted. not flaring, just awake, as if his body whispered, "Don't let them take you apart." The crowd suddenly found themselves stepping back half a pace without meaning to. Not pushed, not forced, just discouraged. Like approaching Harry too closely felt mildly wrong. Hagrid noticed, eyebrows lifting slightly. Harry hugged himself, confused. He didn't want to be rude. He just wanted space to breathe. Somehow the world obeyed. Hagrid leaned in, voice low. "Yeah, all right?" Harry nodded quickly. "Yeah, just. I didn't know they'd." "No, yeah." Hagrid finished, and his voice softened. "Of course they do. Whole world's heard of Harry Potter." Harry swallowed. "Why?" Hagrid's face sobered again. He looked like he was weighing how much truth a kid could carry without snapping. "That's a long story," he said finally. "Not fair today." Harry's scar prickled faintly. Somewhere in his bones, a sense of unfinished business stirred. Brick wall, hidden door. Hagrid led Harry into the pub's back courtyard. It was small, enclosed, lined with rubbish bins and weeds. Harry frowned. "This is—" "Watch," Hagrid said. He drew his umbrella and tapped a specific brick in the wall. 1, 2, 3. The brick shivered. Then the wall unfolded. Not like a door opening, like a pattern rearranging itself into permission. A gap appeared, widening into a magical street bursting with color and sound and life. Harry's breath left him in a quiet, helpless exhale. Diagon Alley. It was chaos in the best way. Shops leaned over cobblestones like they were gossiping. Signs swung. Cauldrons steamed. Owls hooted. People in robes flowed around him like a river. It smelled like parchment and potion smoke and sugar. Harry stood there, frozen, feeling like the world had been hiding a second heartbeat under the first. Hagrid nudged him. "Welcome," he said proudly. Harry stepped forward, and the air around him again shifted, like ancient bones settling into a new shape. A doorway had opened, and something inside Harry clicked like a lock, recognizing its key. Gringotts were metal sings. Hagrid took him straight to Gringotts. The bank looked less like a building and more like a challenge. It towered white and sharp, with doors so polished they reflected Harry's wide eyes back at him. Inside, goblins sat behind desks, quills scratching, eyes clever and cold. Their fingers were long and precise. Their smiles were thin. Harry had never seen anything like them. They didn't feel like friendly magic. They felt like a contract waiting to happen. A goblin at the front desk looked up as they approached, gaze snapping on Harry so fast it was almost a flinch. Then the goblin's eyes narrowed. Not in recognition. In assessment. "You are with Keeper Hagrid," the goblin said flatly. "Yep," Hagrid said. "Here fare Harry Potter's money. And I've got a letter fare, vault 713. The goblin's gaze sharpened at the number. "Indeed." He gestured to another goblin, who hopped down from a high stool and came forward with a ring of keys. Harry's scar prickled. As they walked, Harry passed stacks of coins, heaps of artifacts behind enchanted glass, piles of metal that looked like it had been hammered by monsters. And then it happened. Harry brushed his fingertips against the railing of a staircase. It was just metal. Cold. Smooth. But the moment he touched it, it sang. Not with sound. With feeling. A vibration in his bones, like the metal recognized something in his blood and hummed. Old. 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 Harry jerked his hand back, startled. The goblin escort noticed. His black eyes flicked to Harry's fingers. "Do not touch what is not yours," the goblin said, voice calm and sharp. "I'm sorry," Harry whispered. The goblin paused, then leaned closer a fraction. "You carry law," he said quietly, like he was testing the words. "Not your little British wandcraft. Older law." Hagrid's head snapped around. "What are you saying?" The goblin's thin mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Only that some metals remember, and some blood writes bargains without quill." Harry's stomach dipped. I don't understand. You will, the goblin said, and then he straightened, as if he hadn't said anything at all. They descended into the vaults on a cart that hurtled through tunnels like it was trying to outrun death. Harry clung to the edge, hair whipping his face, laughter and terror mixing in his throat. Hagrid whooped like a child. Harry found himself grinning despite himself. For the first time in his life, fear wasn't the only thing in his chest. Harry's vault opened with a key and a little gold door that looked unimpressive until it swung wide. Inside was a mountain. Gold coins, silver, bronze, piles of it that glittered like dragon hoards in stories. Harry froze. Hagrid beamed. That's your parents' left fare, yeah, he said. You'll be needing it fair school things. Harry stared at the gold, dizzy. His parents had left him something. Not a cupboard, not chores, not fear. Something meant for him. He stepped inside and scooped a handful of coins, feeling their weight. Under his skin, the embers warmed, almost approvingly. Then Hagrid cleared his throat. Right, we got another errand. They went to Vault 713. This one didn't open like a normal door. It was plain, but the air in front of it was tight as a hell breath. The goblin pressed his finger to the door. It shuddered and peeled back. Inside, on a small pedestal, sat a tiny, ugly package wrapped in brown paper. Hagrid snatched it quickly and tucked it away like it might bite. Harry's scar tingled. What's that? Harry asked. Hagrid's eyes darted away. Something fair, Dumbledore, he said quickly. Nothing to do with you. Harry didn't believe him. Not because Hagrid sounded like a liar. Because the air around that package had felt hungry, like a problem waiting for a name. Ollivander's, the wand that recognizes. They bought robes, books, ink, a cauldron, and an owl. Harry picked a small snowy one that stared at him like she'd already decided she belonged. Harry tried not to look stunned at every single thing. But everything was stunning. By the time they reached Ollivander's, Harry's arms were full, his brain was buzzing, and his chest felt like it might burst. The shop was narrow and dusty, full of long boxes stacked to the ceiling. A bell rang softly as they entered. A man appeared as if he'd been waiting behind the air itself. He was pale, with wide eyes the color of moonlight. Harry Potter, Ollivander said softly, and it was not a question. Harry's stomach flipped. How do you? Everyone knows, Ollivander murmured, stepping closer. His gaze fixed on Harry's forehead. I remember every one I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Harry's scar prickled under that stare. Ollivander smiled faintly. Yes, yes, I thought I'd be seeing you soon. He glided past Harry, fingers brushing boxes with reverence. Your father, 11 inches mahogany, pliant. Excellent for transfiguration. Your mother, 10 1/4, willow, swishy. Good for charm work. Harry's heart clenched. The words made his parents feel real in a way he wasn't ready for. Ollivander turned, eyes bright. Now, you. He measured Harry's arm, his height, the distance between his shoulders. Then he began handing wands to Harry like he was testing keys in a lock. Harry waved one. Nothing. Another. A spark. Another. A puff of smoke. Another made a stack of boxes collapse like they were offended. Hagrid chuckled. Huh, bit lively that one. Harry's wrist ached. His fingers were numb. Ollivander watched, intrigued, and Harry felt that strange sense again, like Ollivander wasn't just testing wand compatibility. Like he was listening for something underneath. Then Ollivander's hand paused on a box near the very top. His expression shifted, subtle but real. Curious, he whispered. He handed Harry the wand. The moment Harry's fingers wrapped around it, the wand warmed. Not like wood against skin, like it had been sitting in sunlight. Harry's breath caught. The air in the shop tightened. Dust motes froze mid-drift, as if the room was holding still to watch. Under Harry's skin, Pale gold embers flared into faint lines, like symbols trying to wake. Harry lifted the wand. He didn't flick it. He didn't speak. He just intended. And the light above them didn't flash or spark. It changed. It sharpened, taking on a clearer, steadier glow like someone had quietly corrected the room's lighting rules. Ollivander's eyes went wide with something that looked dangerously close to awe. Then the wand bit. A sharp sting snapped through Harry's palm. He yelped and dropped it. The wand clattered to the floor. Harry stared at his hand. On his skin, faint as if drawn in heat, was a tiny angular mark, two strokes meeting in a hooked line. Not a cut. A symbol. A rune. It pulsed once hot, then cooled into nothing. Harry's heart hammered. What was that? Hagrid leaned in. "Yeah, all right?" Ollivander's voice came out quiet, reverent, unsettled. "It marked you," he said. Harry swallowed. "Why?" Ollivander looked down at the wand on the floor like it had just spoken. "Because," Ollivander murmured, "it thinks you are not merely a wizard." Harry's throat went tight. "I don't." Ollivander bent, picked up the wand carefully, and offered it again, but this time he held it like a question. Harry hesitated, then took it. The warmth returned, but the bite didn't. Instead, the faint rune sensation settled into his bones like a warning. "Power isn't free. It leaves marks." Ollivander nodded slowly, as if Harry had just proven something. "Holly," Ollivander said, almost whispering. 11 inches. Phoenix feather core. Harry blinked. "Phoenix?" "Indeed," Ollivander said, eyes flicking to Hagrid. "And, curious still, the feather came from a phoenix who gave only 2. Harry's scar prickled again, sharp and sudden. Ollivander's gaze sharpened. "Yes," he murmured. "The other wand shares its core." Harry felt cold crawl up his spine. Hagrid shifted awkwardly. That's..." Ollivander didn't look away from Harry. "The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. But sometimes the world chooses a story." Harry's fingers tightened around the wand. Somewhere deep under his skin, that knot tugged like the old law had heard the word phoenix and remembered something it didn't want to. Harry forced his voice steady. "So this is my wand." Ollivander smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yes," he said softly, "and it has chosen a very interesting hand." Harry paid, because Hagrid shoved coins at Ollivander like he couldn't get out fast enough. And as they left the shop, Harry swore the dust motes resumed, drifting with a faint, relieved sigh. The book that shouldn't fit. Hagrid marched him to the bookstore. Harry's arms were already full, but one book caught his attention. It was thin, old, bound in dark leather, with no title. Just a single symbol pressed into the cover. Angular. Sharp. Familiar in a way that made Harry's skin prickle. He reached for it. The moment his fingertips brushed the symbol, the book's cover warmed like the wand had. Harry inhaled sharply. Hagrid turned. "What you got there?" Harry stared down, heartbeat loud. "I don't know. It just..." The shopkeeper squinted at it. "That old runic primer. Nobody buys it. Too hard. Too prickly." "Prickly?" Harry repeated. The shopkeeper shrugged. "Feels like it doesn't want to be read by the wrong person." Harry swallowed and hugged it to his chest. "I want it." Hagrid looked uncertain. "Yeah, sure? Hermione clever kids like that usually get runes later." Harry frowned. "Who's Hermione?" Hagrid coughed. "No one. Just never mind." Harry bought it. The book felt heavier than it should have. Like the words inside had weight. The dream of the tree. That night, Harry lay in a small room above the leaky cauldron, staring at the ceiling. His owl Hedwig, he decided, slept with her head tucked under her wing. Harry's wand lay on the bedside table. The runic primer sat beside it, silent and patient. Harry pressed his palm against his chest. He could almost feel the knot there, tight, old, holding something back. He closed his eyes. Sleep took him like a tide. And he dreamed. A vast tree stretching into forever, branches like roads, roots like veins. A sky full of stars that looked too close. He stood on black soil that felt like iron dust. A raven perched on a branch above him. It stared down with an intelligence that made Harry's stomach twist. One eye was dark. The other was pale silver, like a coin catching moonlight. The raven spoke without sound, and Harry understood anyway. You carry a name you do not yet know. Harry's mouth went dry in the dream. Who are you? The raven tilted its head, and the world behind it shifted. A figure stood there tall, cloaked, broad-shouldered, presence like a storm contained in skin. One eye glinted in the dark. The other was gone. The figure's gaze pinned Harry in place, not cruel, not kind, just ancient. Harry's bones recognized him the way metal had recognized his touch. The figure lifted a hand, and in his palm, pale gold runes burned like small suns. Not yet, the figure's voice seemed to say, not in English, not in any human language. In law. Harry tried to step forward. The ground tightened around his feet like a vow. The knot in his chest pulled hard. And Harry woke with a gasp, hand clutching his shirt. His palm stung faintly. He looked down. For just a second, under the moonlight from the window, a tiny rune-shaped heat mark flickered on his skin. Then it vanished. Like a wink. Like a warning. Like a promise. The first time Harry saw Hogwarts, it didn't feel like a school. It felt like a decision. Like the world had drawn a line and said, past this point, things change. They came by train, packed into a corridor full of noise and sweets and excited voices. Harry sat by the window with Hedwig's cage on his lap and tried not to look like he'd never had friends before. Which he hadn't. A boy with flaming hair sat across from him at one point, chewing something that smelled like pepper and confidence. You're Harry Potter, the boy said, not even bothering to pretend it was a question. Harry's stomach dipped. I. Ron Weasley, the boy said, sticking out a hand like he was introducing himself to a future teammate. My brothers said you'd be on the train. Didn't believe him. Thought they were messing with me. Harry shook his hand, unsure what to do with the warm, casual certainty of it. Ron's eyes flicked to the scar, then away again quickly, like he decided Harry deserved to be treated like a person and not a monument. It was nice. Before Harry could figure out how to thank him, a girl with bushy hair and a face full of determination marched into their compartment like she owned it. Has anyone seen a toad? She demanded. A boy named Neville's lost one. Ron blinked. I don't know. The girl's sharp eyes swept the compartment, pausing on Harry. Oh, you're Harry Potter. Harry flinched automatically. But then she did something unexpected. She didn't squeal. She didn't ask to touch his scar. She just looked curious, like he was a difficult book she'd finally found. I'm Hermione Granger, she said briskly, and you should change into your robe soon. We'll be there any minute. Then she noticed the thin black book Harry had tucked beside his trunk, the one with no title, only that angular symbol. Her eyes widened. Is that? She began, voice suddenly softer. It looks like a runic bind mark. Harry's fingers tightened on the book cover. It's just a primer. Hermione's face did that thing where excitement tries to be polite and fails. That's not just a primer. That symbol, Harry, that's... The train whistle screamed, cutting her off. The world outside the window darkened as the train slowed. Hermione snapped back into efficiency. Right? Robes. Hurry. Ron stared at her like she was mildly terrifying. Blimey. Hermione ignored him. Harry, weirdly, felt a tiny bit safer. The lake, the castle, the rules beneath. They crossed a black lake in little boats under a sky full of stars. The castle rose ahead of them, huge, ancient, and impossible. Towers clawed at the night like stone fingers. Windows glowed warmly, as if Hogwarts itself was lit from inside. Harry couldn't stop staring. And then he felt it. That pressure again. Not fear, not the Dursleys' suffocating normal. This was different. This felt like layers of rules, hundreds of them stacked in the air, like invisible runes carved into the world. Wards, protections. Oaths older than his grandparents, older than Britain's wands, maybe. His chest tightened around the knot beneath his skin, and for a heartbeat, the old law inside him stirred like something recognizing a relative. Hermione, sitting across from him in the boat, went very still. You felt that, she whispered. Harry swallowed. Felt what? Hermione's eyes glittered in the starlight. The wards. Hogwarts has the strongest wards in Europe. I read about them. Ron groaned. Of course you did. Hermione shot him a look. Ron shut up instantly. Harry looked back at the castle. His scar prickled faintly, not with pain, but with awareness. Hogwarts wasn't just a place. It was a boundary, a threshold, and thresholds mattered. The hat hesitates. Inside the great hall, candles floated like 1,000 small suns. The ceiling mirrored the night sky, so perfectly Harry almost forgot he was indoors. Professors watched from the staff table. Harry recognized Hagrid, beaming like a proud uncle. And at the center of the room sat a battered old hat on a stool. McGonagall called names. One by one, children went up, put on the hat, and got sorted. Harry's hands went cold when his name echoed across the hall. Potter, Harry. The room shifted whispers, stares, the weight of 1,000 stories. Harry walked forward, legs moving like they belonged to someone else. He sat. The hat dropped onto his head, smelling faintly of dust and ancient opinions. A voice slid into his mind like a whisper through parchment. Appoint you. Harry's throat went dry. Hello. Not often I get two histories in one head, that there's the boy, and then there's the knot, the old thing under your skin. Harry's pulse thudded hard. What knot? The Sorting Hat went quiet for so long the great hall began to murmur. Harry felt sweat prickle at the back of his neck. Then, softly, the hat spoke again. There are oaths in you that don't belong to this land. Old laws. Northern laws. That could make you dangerous. Harry swallowed. I don't want to be dangerous. The hat paused like it was surprised. No, you don't. That matters. Another long silence. Harry's fingers curled in his lap, nails biting his skin. Finally, the hat seemed to sigh. You'll need courage, not the loud kind, the stubborn kind, and friends who pull you back when you drift too far into destiny. Harry's heart clenched. Then the hat shouted, Gryffindor. The table erupted. Harry stumbled off the stool, half-dazed, and slid into the cheering crowd. Ron hooped and thumped his back hard enough to jolt his teeth. Hermione smiled like she'd just solved something complicated and satisfying. Harry sat between them, warmth spreading in his chest like he'd been given a seat in a world he didn't know he was allowed to enter. A castle that watches. The first weeks blurred classes, staircases that moved like they had moods, portraits that judged you out loud, ghosts that drifted through walls like they owned them, which technically they did. Harry learned quickly that Hogwarts wasn't safe. But it was alive. And it listened. Not in the way his cupboard had listened. In a bigger way like the castle had rules built into its bones, and those rules were always watching for cracks. Sometimes, when Harry walked past certain arches or doorways, his skin prickled and the knot in his chest tightened. Thresholds. Hogwarts was full of them. He didn't tell anyone at first. Because how do you explain, hey, I think the hallway is judging me? The first slip, a truth that hurts. It happened in potions. Snape swept into the dungeon like a bat that had learned to hate sunlight personally. His eyes landed on Harry immediately, and the temperature of the room seemed to drop in response. Potter, Snape drawled, our new celebrity. Harry sat up straighter, forcing his face blank the way he'd learned at Privet Drive. Snape stalked the rows, setting ingredients down like he was planting landmines. Today, he said silkily, We will be brewing a simple cure for boils. Those who cannot follow instructions, his gaze flicked to Harry, will discover how quickly skin can blister. They started. Ron fumbled, swearing under his breath. Hermione was perfect, of course. Harry focused hard, trying to match the instructions exactly. Then, a sharp crash. Someone's vial shattered. A wave of sour, burning smoke rose. A boy laughed sharp and smug. Draco Malfoy. Oops, Malfoy said, pretending innocence. Clumsy hands. Must be hard when you're poor. Ron's ears went red. You did that on purpose. Malfoy widened his eyes theatrically. Did I? Snape glided over, expression pleased in a way that made Harry's stomach twist. Mr. Weasley, Snape said softly, control your temper. It was Malfoy. Ron snapped. He nudged Harry's elbow. I did no such thing, Malfoy said sweetly. Snape's lip curled. I see no evidence of that. Harry stared at the mess. He could feel Ron's anger like heat. And inside Harry's chest, something tightened. Not rage. Not revenge. Something colder and clearer. A need. Truth. Harry's quill lay beside his cauldron. Without really thinking, without knowing why, Harry dragged the tip of the quill across the wooden desk. A quick angular scratch. Just a shape. A hook, 2 lines, a pointed bend. The moment the symbol formed, his wand in his pocket warmed sharply, like it had noticed. Harry's scar prickled. The air above the desk steadied. Then Malfoy opened his mouth again. I swear I didn't. His words stopped. Not because Snape interrupted. Because Malfoy's tongue stuck to the lie mid-sentence. His eyes widened. His face flushed. Malfoy choked. And then, to everyone's horror, the truth spilled out like it had been yanked. I did it, Malfoy blurted, voice too loud. I nudged him. I wanted it to spill. I wanted Potter to look stupid. The room went dead silent. Ron made a strangled, triumphant sound. Hermione's eyes went huge. Snape froze like someone had slapped him. Malfoy's hands flew to his mouth in panic, as if he could shove the words back inside. Harry's heart slammed against his ribs. Because he hadn't meant to do that. He just wanted the truth to be seen. And the world had obeyed. Snape's gaze snapped to Harry, eyes narrowing like knives. Potter, Snape said softly, dangerously, what did you do? Harry opened his mouth, and pain exploded through his palm. A sharp, vicious sting like the rune had bitten him back. Harry hissed and clutched his hand under the desk. His vision swam. The edges of the room blurred. It wasn't normal pain. It felt like something deep inside him was being taxed, like a muscle he didn't know existed had been forced to lift too much weight. Hermione leaned toward him, whispering urgently, Harry, are you okay? Harry forced a nod, but his stomach rolled. Snape's eyes flicked down to Harry's desk, to the tiny scratch mark, to the angular shape carved into the wood. Snape's face tightened. Not recognition. Suspicion. Like he'd just spotted a crack in a wall he thought was solid. You, Snape murmured, voice so low only Harry heard, are going to be trouble. Harry's hand throbbed. The rune on the desk looked harmless. But the truth it forced had just made enemies. Babbling notices. By dinner, rumors had spread. Malfoy confessed. Potter made him confess. The Potter scar glowed. Potter did mind magic. Harry sat at the Gryffindor table, trying to disappear into his mashed potatoes. Ron looked thrilled. That was brilliant. Harry stared at his aching palm. It hurt. Hermione was watching Harry like he was a puzzle and a person at the same time. Harry, what exactly did you draw? I don't know, Harry admitted, voice tight. It just happened. Hermione's excitement dimmed into concern. That's not normal. Ron snorted. Nothing about Harry is normal. Harry didn't laugh. Because his hand still throbbed, and under the throb, there was something worse. A faint emptiness. Like he paid a price and didn't know what he'd bought. The next morning, an owl dropped a note onto Harry's breakfast plate. Not a school owl. A raven-black bird with clever eyes that stared too long. Harry's stomach dipped. The note was sealed with plain wax, no crest. Inside, in neat handwriting, were only a few words. Mr. Potter, please come to my office after your last class today. Professor babbling. Hermione leaned in, whispering, Bathsheba babbling. Ancient runes professor. Ron frowned. Why is a third-year subject professor writing to you? Harry's palm pulsed faintly, like it remembered the rune. Harry swallowed. Maybe she knows. Hermione's eyes flicked to his untitled runic book. If she does, you should let me come with you. Harry hesitated, then nodded once. Because he didn't want to be alone with this. Not again. That afternoon, as Harry walked the corridor toward the classroom tower listed in the note, the castle's air shifted around him. Thresholds, rules, warnings, and somewhere deep in his chest, the knot tightened like something ancient was bracing. As if Hogwarts had just noticed it wasn't dealing with an ordinary first year anymore. Harry didn't like walking through Hogwarts alone after dark. Not because he was scared of ghosts. Nearly headless Nick had already tried to give him friendly advice about armor that sometimes moved on its own, but because the castle had a way of watching. The staircases creaked like they were gossiping. The portraits muttered. The torches flickered like they had opinions. And tonight, as Harry followed the directions on Professor Babbling's note up 2 flights, past a tapestry of dancing trolls, left at the window that always smelled faintly of rain, he felt it again. That pressure, that invisible boundary tightening around him like the castle was checking his shape. Hermione walked beside him, practically vibrating with restrained curiosity. Ron trailed behind, half grumpy and half nervous. This is mental, Ron whispered. Ancient runes isn't even for first years. Hermione hissed back. That's exactly why it matters. Harry kept his eyes forward. His palms still ached from potions, a dull throb that came and went like a heartbeat. He hadn't told them the worst part. It wasn't just pain. It was the feeling that something had taken a small piece of him when he made Malfoy tell the truth. Not a chunk of flesh or blood. Something subtler. Like energy, like breath, like attacks. They reached a narrow door with a small brass plaque. B. Babbling ancient runes. Hermione read it out loud, like she wanted the words to become real through repetition. Harry lifted his hand to knock, and the knot in his chest tightened. Not in warning. In recognition. Like something in him knew what waited on the other side. He knocked anyway. Enter, came a crisp voice. Harry pushed the door open. Babbling's office. The room didn't feel like a classroom. It felt like stepping into the inside of an old book. Runestones sat on shelves like sleeping animals, each carved with symbols that seemed to catch the light wrong, as if they were slightly out of phase with normal reality. Bundles of parchment were stacked neatly, but the edges shimmered faintly, enchanted to preserve ink, maybe, or to prevent copying. A small brass bowl in the corner held what looked like black sand. No, Harry realized with a jolt, it wasn't sand. It was iron filings. Professor Babbling sat behind a desk covered in rune charts and an ink pot that smelled like pine smoke. She wasn't old, but she carried herself like someone who'd spent most of her life standing near dangerous knowledge and learning how to keep her hands steady. Her eyes flicked to Hermione first, assessing. Then Ron, mildly unimpressed. Then Harry, and the assessment sharpened into something careful. Mr. Potter, she said calmly. Thank you for coming. Harry swallowed. You asked. I did. Her gaze dropped briefly to Harry's right hand, then back up to his face. And you brought friends. Hermione opened her mouth immediately. Professor E. Babbling lifted one finger, and Hermione snapped her mouth shut like she'd been hit with a silent jinx. I admire initiative, Babbling said, but I prefer privacy. Ron looked relieved. Hermione looked offended on a moral level. Babbling's eyes returned to Harry. Your friends may wait outside. Mr. Potter may stay. Harry glanced at Hermione. Hermione gave him a fierce little nod that meant be careful and remember everything. Ramal, don't die. Harry exhaled and stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and the air in the room settled. Not like a lock turning, like a rule being written. Babbling motioned to the chair opposite her desk. Seat. Harry sat. Babbling didn't smile. Not unkindly, just professionally. Before we begin, she said, I need you to answer one question as honestly as you can. Harry's throat tightened. Okay. Babbling leaned forward slightly. Do you know what you did yesterday in potions? Harry hesitated. I drew something. Babbling's gaze sharpened. And? Harry looked down at his hands. I wanted the truth. A long pause. Babbling exhaled slowly, as if that answer had confirmed something she didn't want confirmed. Show me, she said. Harry's pulse jumped. Show you what? The symbol, Babbling said gently, but there was steel under it. Draw it. Harry stared at her desk. I don't know if I can. You can, Babbling said. Not command. Confidence. It made something in Harry's chest tighten again. He swallowed and reached for the quill she slid across the desk. The quill felt normal. The parchment felt normal. Harry lowered the quill tip. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then his hand moved. Not fast, not dramatic. It moved like someone following a path that already existed. A hook, an angle, two lines meeting in a sharp bend. The moment the shape completed, the ink darkened. Not just black, black like a shadow. The rune pulsed once, and Harry's palm flared with pain again, sharp, immediate. He hissed and jerked his hand back. Babbling's eyes flicked to his reaction, then to the rune. The symbol on the parchment didn't glow brightly. It didn't shoot sparks. It simply stayed, like it had weight, like it refused to be just ink. Babbling murmured, almost to herself, not pure Elder Futhark. Harry's breath came shallow. What does that mean? Babbling looked up. It means he did not draw a school rune. Harry's stomach dipped. Babbling reached into a drawer and pulled out a small wooden tile. It was smooth and pale, with a carved symbol Harry didn't recognize. She placed it beside his inked rune. This, she said, tapping the tile, is Ansa's the rune of speech, breath, message. Then she tapped Harry's rune. And this resembles it, but it has been bound to something else. Harry swallowed hard. Bound to what? Babbling's eyes were sharp. Compulsion. Threshold. A forceful declaration of truth. Harry's stomach twisted. I didn't mean to force him. I just wanted it to be known. And it was known, Babbling said quietly, because you did not cast a spell. You did not ask the world politely. Her gaze flicked to Harry's chest, as if she could see through bone. You wrote a rule. Harry went very still. Babbling leaned back slightly, watching him. That is why it hurt. Rules demand payment. Harry's throat tightened. Payment? Babbling's eyes softened a fraction, not sympathy exactly, but understanding. Magic always costs something, Mr. Potter. Wand magic hides it behind technique, training, and borrowed structures. Runic magic is less forgiving. Harry stared at the inked symbol. It suddenly looked less cool and more like a tiny blade. Babbling continued, voice calm. You forced truth. The world complied. And you paid in strain because you're not trained, not shielded, and... She paused. Harry's skin prickled. And you are carrying something that responds too easily, she finished. Harry's mouth went dry. What am I carrying? Babbling didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her desk and pulled out a thin pair of gloves dragonhide, Harry realized, with runes stitched into the seams. She slid them on before touching his parchment. That tiny precaution made Harry's stomach sink. Babbling touched the rune. The ink pulsed again. Babbling's eyes narrowed. May I see your palm? She asked. Harry hesitated, then opened his hand. There was no mark there now. But Babbling's gaze sharpened anyway, like she could see something under the skin. She tilted his hand slightly, angling it toward the lamp. For the briefest heartbeat, Harry saw it too. A faint heat shadow, angular and hooked. Not visible like ink. Visible like a memory of fire. Babbling released his hand carefully, like she didn't want to trigger anything by accident. "You have a wand," she said, "and it accepted you." Harry nodded, confused. "It had also marked you," Babbling continued. "That is unusual. Wands choose. They do not brand." Harry swallowed. "It bit me." Babbling's mouth tightened. "It tested you and decided you were real." Harry didn't like the sound of that. Babbling removed her gloves and folded them neatly, like she was trying to keep her movements precise to avoid causing ripples. Then she said, very plainly, "Mr. Potter, you are not to draw any more runes unintentionally." Harry blinked. "How am I supposed to stop that?" Babbling's eyes fixed on his. "By learning control." Harry's chest loosened slightly, relief mixing with fear. Babbling reached to the shelf behind her and pulled down a small wooden disc about the size of a coin. It was blank. She placed it on the desk between them. "This is ashwood," she said. "A neutral medium. Accepts ink, accepts carving. It will not fight you." She slid a small blade across the desk. Harry stared at it. "You want me to carve?" Babbling nodded once. "A simple rune. A safe rune." Harry's pulse quickened. "What kind?" Babbling picked up a rune tile and set it in front of him. The symbol looked like a stick figure with arms raised. "This is Algi's," Babbling said. "Protection. Shield. The simplest form, ward." Harry stared at it. The symbol made something in him stir a familiar warmth, like the cupboard lock clicking. Protection. Yes. That made sense. "Copy it," Babbling said. Harry picked up the blade. His fingers felt clumsy. He pressed the tip into the ash wood and began to carve. The first line went crooked. Babbling didn't correct him. Harry carved the second line, then the third. He finished the shape. Nothing happened. Harry exhaled too fast. "See? It's just." Babbling's voice cut in, calm and precise. "Intent." Harry blinked. "What?" "Runes are not art," Babbling said. "They are meaning. You carve the shape. Now you must write the truth into it." Harry swallowed. He looked down at the disc. Protection. Not for glory. Not for control. Protection because he didn't want anyone else to get hurt because of him. He held the disc in both hands and thought as clearly as he could. Keep harm away. The disc warmed. Not hot. Warm like skin. A faint pale gold shimmer crawled through the grooves he'd carved and settled into the symbol like light deciding to live there. Harry's breath caught. Babbling watched closely. "Good," she murmured. Then she did something that startled him. She tossed a small metal paperweight at his face. Harry flinched instinctively. The disc in his hands pulsed. And the paperweight slowed. Not stopped completely. Just slowed like it had hit thick water. It dropped to the floor with a dull clunk. Harry stared, stunned. Babbling nodded once. Tier 1 warding. Minimal effect. Controlled. Harry's chest heaved. "That was me?" "That was your intent holding," Babbling said, "and your medium accepting it." Harry's head spun, but this time the dizziness wasn't fear. It was possibility. Then the dull throb began behind his eyes. A familiar fatigue. Harry swayed slightly in his chair. Babbling's gaze sharpened. "And there it is," she said quietly. "The cost." Harry swallowed, trying to push through it. "It's not that bad." Babbling's face did not soften. "Do not lie to yourself, Mr. Potter. Runic magic punishes dishonesty, especially in the user." Harry forced himself to breathe slowly. The fatigue eased slightly, but it didn't vanish. Babbling tapped the desk once. "This disc will help you. It is a controlled anchor. Use it only when necessary." Harry held the disc tighter, like it might float away. Babbling's eyes flicked toward the door as if she could sense the hallway outside. Then she looked back at Harry and spoke lower. Now, one more question, and this one matters more than the first. Harry's throat tightened. Okay. Babbling leaned in. Has anyone ever told you the truth about what you are? Harry's blood ran cold. He thought of the Raven dream. The one-eyed figure. The word that had sounded like iron in his bones. Asgard. Harry licked his lips. No. Babbling studied him for a long moment, then slowly sat back. Good, she said finally. Then we will be careful. Harry blinked. Careful about what? Babbling's eyes were suddenly very sharp. About who learns you can write rules. Dumbledore's tea. Harry left Babbling's office with the ashwood disc in his pocket and a strange hollow steadiness in his chest. Hermione practically pounced on him in the corridor. What did she say? What did she do? Did she test you? What rune was it? Ron hovered behind her, trying to look casual and failing. Harry opened his mouth, and a quiet voice behind them said, Mr. Potter. They turned. Professor McGonagall stood there, crisp as a blade, lips pressed thin. Headmaster Dumbledore would like to see you, she said. Harry's stomach dipped. Am I in trouble? McGonagall's expression didn't change. That depends on what you did. Hermione looked like she was about to explode from not being included. Ron looked relieved it wasn't him. Harry followed McGonagall through twisting corridors until they reached the stone gargoyle. Sherbet Lemon, McGonagall said. The gargoyle hopped aside. Harry's chest tightened again as he stepped into the moving staircase. It wasn't fear this time. It was the same sensation he'd felt at the leaky cauldron door at the wall into Diagon Alley. A threshold. A rule. Dumbledore's office smelled like lemon drops and old paper. The headmaster sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, eyes bright behind half-moon spectacles. He smiled when Harry entered. Ah, Dumbledore said warmly. Harry, please sit. Harry sat in the chair opposite, back straight, hands clenched in his lap. Dumbledore poured tea as if this was a normal Tuesday. I hope Hogwarts is treating you well, Dumbledore said. Harry nodded. Yes, sir. Dumbledore's eyes flicked quick as a blink toward Harry's right hand, then back to his face. Harry's stomach sank. Dumbledore knew. Dumbledore slid a plate of biscuits across. Would you like one? Harry hesitated, then took one, because refusing felt like making a mistake he didn't understand. Dumbledore sipped his tea. Professor Babbling requested permission to begin supplemental instruction. Harry's heart thumped. Am I not allowed to? Dumbledore held up a hand. You were allowed to learn. The warmth in his voice was real. But then his eyes sharpened slightly. You're also allowed to be safe while learning. Harry swallowed. I didn't mean to do anything. It just happened. I believe you, Dumbledore said gently. Harry blinked, startled by how quickly Dumbledore believed him. Dumbledore continued. There are forms of magic that respond to emotion, and forms that respond to intent. Both can be dangerous when untrained. Harry's fingers tightened in his lap. Professor Babbling said, It's like writing rules. Dumbledore's gaze turned distant for a moment, like he was looking at memories with sharp edges. Yes, he said softly. That is an accurate way to describe it. Harry's throat went dry. Do you know what it is? Dumbledore's eyes returned to him. I know, Dumbledore said carefully, that something ancient has been woven into your life since before you could speak. Harry's heart hammered. Dumbledore's voice remained calm. I know there are protections on you some I recognize, some I do not. And I know that certain powers in this world would find you very interesting if they realized what is waking. Harry's skin prickled. Dumbledore set down his cup. So I will give you advice, Harry, the kind that matters more than spells. Harry leaned forward without meaning to. Dumbledore's eyes softened. Do not make promises you cannot keep, Dumbledore said quietly. Not with runes. Not with magic. Not with your heart. Harry swallowed, thinking of vows and rules and costs. Dumbledore's smile returned, faint. And if you ever feel something pulling you toward being a symbol instead of being a boy, talk to your friends. Harry's chest tightened. Hermione and Ron. Friends. Dumbledore stood, as if the conversation was almost finished. Then he added, almost casually, "Oh, and Harry?" Harry looked up. Dumbledore's eyes glinted. "If you happen to see a three-headed dog in the castle, I suggest you do not attempt to pet it." Harry blinked. "A what?" Dumbledore's smile widened. "Good night, Harry." Harry left Dumbledore's office with his brain buzzing and his biscuit half-eaten. At the bottom of the stairs, he found Hermione and Ron waiting like nervous guards. Ron immediately asked, "Three-headed dog?" Hermione's eyes narrowed. "Why would Dumbledore?" Harry exhaled. "Because we're probably going to see one." Fluffy and the door that hummed. They saw it 2 nights later. It started with a bad decision, which was basically tradition at this point. Malfoy had been baiting them all day, snide comments, smug smiles, that particular kind of cruelty that only felt brave because it happened in public. Potter, Malfoy drawled after dinner, loud enough for people to hear. "Still playing with little scratches on desks? Careful. Someone might think you're cheating." Harry's palm throbbed. Hermione grabbed Harry's sleeve. "Ignore him." Ron muttered something rude. And then, because Hogwarts loved bad timing, Peeves the poltergeist swooped in, shrieking about midnight duels and cowards and snot-nosed babies. Malfoy's eyes lit up like he'd been handed a weapon. "Midnight," Malfoy whispered at Harry as he passed. "Trophy room, unless you're afraid." Ron bristled instantly. Hermione looked like she wanted to strangle all of them. Harry didn't want to go, but he also didn't want to be the boy who always backed down. So at midnight, they crept through corridors with their hearts in their throats. And of course it went wrong. Filch appeared like a nightmare with keys. They ran. They turned corners blindly. They burst through a door and found themselves on the 3rd floor. The air changed immediately. It was colder here. Not temperature cold. Rule cold. Like the castle itself had drawn a boundary and said, "Not for you." Hermione grabbed Harry's arm. "This corridor is forbidden," she whispered fiercely. "There's an enchantment notice." Ron's eyes widened. "Shut up. Listen." There was a sound ahead. A low, wet breathing. Like 3 lungs at once. Harry felt the knot in his chest tighten hard. Not fear. Recognition. A threshold. A guarded door. And something beneath it important. They crept forward. Moonlight from a high window lit the shape at the end of the corridor. 3 massive heads. Teeth like knives. A dog the size of a small car. Fluffy. All 3 heads turned toward them in eerie unison. Hermione made a small, strangled noise. Ron's face went pale. Nope. Harry's pocket warmed. The ashwood disc. Protection. Harry's fingers closed around it instinctively. And as he did, Fluffy's middle head tilted, nostrils flaring, as if it had smelled something else under Harry's skin. The air thickened. For one terrifying heartbeat, Harry thought the beast might attack. Then Fluffy's left head snarled, pawing at the floor. Harry glanced down. He saw something that made his stomach twist. On the stone near Fluffy's paws, faint but undeniable, were scratch marks. Not claw marks. Carvings. Angular. Runic. Old wards. The door Fluffy guarded wasn't just locked. It was written shut. Ron grabbed Harry's sleeve. "Move." They backed away slowly, then ran the moment they were out of sight. They didn't stop running until they were safely back in Gryffindor Tower, panting like they just outrun death. Hermione slammed her book onto a table. Why would they keep that in school? Ron wheezed, to keep people like us from touching it. Harry didn't speak, because his fingers still tingled from the ash disc, and because in that forbidden corridor, he'd felt something beneath the floor. Not a monster, not a dog, something hidden, something that didn't belong to Hogwarts, something that felt like hunger wrapped in paper. Halloween. The next day was Halloween. The great hall filled with floating pumpkins and bats that weren't real, but tried very hard to be dramatic about it. Harry should have been happy, but the castle felt tense. Even the air seemed to be listening for a crack. At dinner, Ron complained about Hermione being insufferable in charms. Hermione, cheeks flushed, stood abruptly and left the hall. Harry watched her go, guilt twisting in his chest. Then Quirrell burst into the hall like a man being chased by his own lungs. Troll, Quirrell gasped. In the dungeons. Thought you ought to know. He fainted. Chaos erupted. Harry stood so fast his chair scraped. And then he remembered. Hermione. She was in the hall. She wouldn't know. Harry's stomach dropped. Ron's face went pale at the same time. She's in the bathroom, he whispered. They didn't think. They ran. Through corridors full of shouting teachers and stampeding students. Down staircases. Past moving portraits that screamed at them for being out of bed. Harry's pocket burned with warmth. The ash disc. Protection. They reached the girls' bathroom. And the smell hit them first. Oat. Damp stone. A sour, animal stink. The troll was inside. It lumbered in the center of the room, club dragging, small eyes squinting as it searched for the source of a terrified sob. Hermione stood near a sink, wand up, shaking so hard the wand tip wobbled. She looked at Harry and Ron like she'd just seen a lifeboat. Harry, she choked. The troll turned. Its club lifted. Ron squeaked, oh no. Harry's brain went ice calm in that terrible way it sometimes did when survival took over. Wand magic was fast, but he wasn't good enough yet to outduel a troll. Runes were slow, but he had one anchor. His hand flew into his pocket. He ripped out the ash disc and slapped it against the doorframe as the troll charged. The symbol pulsed pale gold. Harry's voice came out raw, not as a spell, but as a truth. No harm crosis. The air tightened. The troll swung its club, and the club hit an invisible wall. Not a solid wall. A thick rule. The impact boomed like a drum. The troll staggered back, confused. Harry's vision blurred instantly. Pain lanced behind his eyes. He swayed. Ron, seizing the moment, shouted, Wingardium Leviosa. The club lifted wobbly, uncertain, then rose above the troll's head. Hermione, suddenly sharp through fear, snapped, no, like this. The club slammed down, right onto the troll's skull. The troll collapsed with a wet thud that shook the sinks. Silence. Harry's knees buckled. Ron caught him by the arm, breath ragged. Mate, are you? Harry couldn't answer. The rune on the disc pulsed once more. Then went cold. The doorframe felt normal again. The cost hit him like a wave. Not just tired. Hollow. Like something had been scooped out of him and left an ache behind. He forced air into his lungs. Hermione stared at Harry with wide eyes. What was that? Harry swallowed. Protection, he rasped. Then footsteps thundered in the corridor. McGonagall appeared first, eyes blazing. Snape behind her, face like carved stone. Quirrell squeaked somewhere in the back. McGonagall's gaze swept the unconscious troll, the wrecked bathroom, then snapped to them. What, she said, voice deadly calm, are you doing here? Hermione, bless her, stepped forward and lied for them, claiming she'd gone looking for the troll and they'd try to save her. McGonagall's expression flickered between fury and something like reluctant admiration. Snape's eyes, however, went straight to Harry's hand, to the faintly scorched ash disc, to the groove of algae that still held a whisper of gold. His gaze sharpened. Not suspicion anymore. Interest. Dangerous interest. Snape said softly, that is not standard defensive magic. McGonagall snapped, enough. They're alive. But Snape didn't look away from Harry. Harry felt the knot in his chest tighten. Not fear. Warning. because some people didn't see protection. They saw tools. Later that night, Harry lay in bed staring up at the canopy, exhausted beyond anything he'd felt before. Ron was snoring immediately, like his body refused to acknowledge consequences. Hermione lay awake too, silent for once. In the darkness, she whispered, "Harry, that wasn't a spell, was it?" Harry's palm throbbed faintly. "No," he whispered back. "It was a rule." Hermione's voice was very small. "That's incredible." Harry swallowed. "It's scary." Hermione didn't argue. And somewhere outside, far beyond the castle walls, a raven sat on a branch and watched Hogwarts with a pale, coin-bright eye. As if waiting for the moment the old saga finally said its next line. After the troll, everything changed in the quiet ways. People didn't say it out loud, not in the great hall where gossip echoed off enchanted ceilings, but Harry felt it anyway. The looks were different now. Less curious celebrity and more that boyish trouble and or salvation, depending on your mood. And in Gryffindor Tower, it became official. Ron sat with him at meals without needing an excuse. Hermione stopped acting like she didn't care what anyone thought, at least with them. She still corrected Ron's pronunciation of Wingardium with the force of a small hurricane, but now she did it while passing him toast. They were friends. Harry didn't have a lot of practice with friends. So sometimes he just sat there, quietly amazed that no one was waiting to hurt him for existing. But the magic didn't let him forget. Because the day after Halloween, the ache arrived. Not a bruise, not a sore muscle. An emptiness behind his ribs, like someone had scooped the inside of his chest with a cold spoon. He'd felt it before, after the truth mark in potions, but this was bigger. The Algi's ward on the doorframe had held a troll back. It had saved Hermione, and it had taken something from him for the privilege. Harry tried to hide it. He'd trained at hiding things. He was practically fluent. But Hermione noticed anyway. She always noticed. It was the 4th day after Halloween. Harry was halfway through breakfast when his spoon slipped from his fingers and clinked loudly against his plate. He stared at it like it had betrayed him. Hermione leaned close, voice low. "You're shaking." "I'm fine," Harry said automatically. Hermione's eyes narrowed, the way they did when a textbook didn't match the real world. That's what people say when they're not. Ron chewed his sausage slowly, watching Harry like he was watching someone try not to fall off a broom. "Mate," he said, quieter than usual, "you've been kind of pale." Harry stared at his hands. He didn't want to scare them, but he also didn't want to lie to them the way the Dursleys lied to themselves. "It costs," he admitted, voice barely above the clatter of the hall. "When I do it, the rule thing." Hermione's expression sharpened. "Like exhaustion?" Harry swallowed. "Like pieces." Ron froze mid-chew. "Pieces of what?" Harry didn't know how to explain it without sounding mad. "Like, if you had a scarf," he said, choosing words carefully, "and every time you needed warmth, you pulled a thread out of it." Hermione went very still. Ron looked horrified. "That's Harry. That's mental. You can't just stop doing it." Harry gave him a look that wasn't quite a smile. "I tried." Hermione's fingers tightened around her goblet. Professor Babbling said there were costs, but she didn't say. "She said rules demand payment," Harry murmured. Hermione's jaw set. "Then we learn how not to overpay." Ron pointed his fork at her. That sounds like something Hermione would say. Hermione ignored him, already digging in her bag. "We need to document symptoms. Frequency. Triggers. Medium used. Duration held." Ron groaned. "I hate when you turn my friends into homework." Harry's chest warmed anyway, because Hermione's version of caring looked like a battle plan. Snape's eyes. Snape didn't speak to Harry about the bathroom. Not directly. Snape never did direct when he could do knife-thin implication instead. But Harry began to notice him more than usual. Snape's gaze lingered on Harry's hands when Harry passed in corridors. It slid briefly to Harry's pocket, like Snape knew something was inside it. The ashwood disc warmed uncomfortably whenever Snape got too close. Like it didn't like him. Harry didn't blame it. Then, one afternoon, Snape cornered Harry after potions. The dungeon classroom had emptied. The air still smelled like vinegar and burnt nettles. "Potter," Snape said softly. Harry stopped. His instinct screamed at him to run, but Hogwarts was full of teachers who could turn fleeing into humiliation in a heartbeat. "Yes, Professor." Snape glided closer, robes whispering like a threat. "I have rarely seen," Snape murmured, "such consistent incompetence paired with such inconvenient survival." Harry's jaw tightened. "I followed the instructions." Snape's lip curled. "You followed them the way a troll follows a ballet." Harry's scar prickled faintly, not pain warning. Snape's eyes flicked to Harry's right hand. "Your little trick in class," Snape continued, voice like poison honey. "The one that made Mr. Malfoy confess." Harry said nothing, because saying anything felt like stepping onto ice that might crack. Snape leaned in, close enough that Harry could smell bitter herbs and something cold beneath it. "Where did you learn it?" Harry's throat tightened. "I didn't." Snape's eyes narrowed. "Do not insult my intelligence." Harry's fingers curled. He could feel the ash disc in his pocket like a heartbeat. Protection. A line. A rule. He didn't want to use it. Not here. Not for pride. Snape watched him closely, like he could see the debate in his bones. Then, to Harry's surprise, Snape stepped back. "Interesting," Snape murmured, almost to himself. "You do not reach for power like most children would." Harry forced air into his lungs. "I just want to learn." Snape's gaze sharpened. "No," he said softly. "You want to survive." Harry didn't answer. Snape turned, robes swirling. "Be careful what you carve into the world, Potter," he said, over his shoulder. "Some laws cannot be undone." Harry stood there long after Snape left, heart hammering. Because it hadn't sounded like a threat. It had sounded like knowledge. The library and the name that won't sit still. They started digging. Now we should probably investigate digging. Hermione Granger digging. Which meant one stack of books on three-headed dogs, which mostly just said don't. One stack on Hogwarts forbidden corridors, which mostly said also don't. And a growing, obsessive pile on Nicholas Flamel, because Hermione had caught one detail in Hagrid's Gringotts story like a hawk catching a mouse. Hagrid said the package came from Vault 713, Hermione whispered, eyes bright. That vault is high security. Not many things go in or out of it. Ron frowned. What's in it? Something valuable, Hermione said, like that answered everything. Harry's scar prickled faintly, remembering that brown paper package like hunger in his bones. They searched for Flamel and found nothing. Not in Hogwarts, a history. Not in great wizards of the 20th century. Not even in Hermione's personal emergency stash of books that might save us. Hermione got that look on her face, the one that meant she would fight the universe itself if it withheld an answer. He's been removed, she said flatly. Ron blinked. What? Hermione's voice sharpened. Someone deliberately scrubbed him from common references. Harry swallowed. Why? Hermione's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, toward the third-floor corridor they weren't supposed to think about. Because whatever he's connected to, she whispered, is connected to what Fluffy is guarding. Ron shivered. I hate this school. Harry didn't. He was just starting to realize Hogwarts had secrets the way the sea has deep places. And he was wading out farther than he knew how to swim. Christmas, the gift that feels like home. When December arrived, Hogwarts turned soft around the edges. Snow piled on windowsills. The great hall filled with enchanted furs that smelled like pine and cold nights. The castle creaked in a happier tone, like it enjoyed pretending it was wholesome. Students began leaving to go home. Ron stayed because he didn't fancy going back to a house full of siblings who would throw things at him for fun. Hermione left because she said something about family tradition, though her eyes lingered on Harry a second longer than usual before she boarded the train. Harry stayed because where else was there? On Christmas morning, the dormitory was quiet. Just Harry and Ron in a room full of sleeping beds and drifting gold dust from the enchanted ceiling. Ron tore into a pile of presents like a starving man. Harry sat on his bed, staring at his small stack. One from Hagrid, a homemade flute that looked like it might have been whittled with love and a blunt axe. One from Mrs. Weasley, a sweater that said H and smelled faintly of warm kitchens. Harry ran his fingers over the sweater like it was proof he existed. Then he noticed the last package. It was plain. No name. No tag. Just a note tucked under the ribbon. Harry unfolded it. Use it well. That was all. Harry's stomach dipped. He tore the paper carefully, as if the gift might explode. Inside was a silvery gray cloak, folded like moonlight made solid. Harry touched it. The moment his fingers brushed the fabric, the knot in his chest tightened. Not pain. Recognition. This cloak wasn't ordinary magic. It felt like rules. Old ones. The fabric didn't shimmer like enchanted cloth. It felt certain, like it refused to be anything but what it was. Ron leaned over Harry's shoulder. What is it? Harry whispered. I think it's an invisibility cloak. Ron's eyes widened so far Harry worried they might fall out. No way. Harry lifted it and draped it over himself. He vanished. Not blurred. Not hidden. Gone. Ron yelped. Harry. Harry's voice came from nowhere. I'm here. Ron's face was equal parts terror and awe. That's blimey. That's who sent you that? Harry lowered the cloak and reappeared, heart pounding. He didn't know who sent it. But he knew this. When he'd been under it, his runic sense had gone quiet. As if the cloak didn't just hide bodies. It hid threads. It hid fate. And that was terrifying. Because why would someone want to hide him that deeply? The mirror of Ariste. That night, Harry couldn't sleep. The cloak sat at the foot of his bed like a dare. The castle outside was quiet, blanketed in snow. Ron snored. Harry stared at the ceiling and thought of Dumbledore's tea, of Babbling's gloves, of Snape's eyes. Old laws. New warnings. Finally, Harry slid out of bed, grabbed the cloak, and wrapped himself in it like it was a second skin. He didn't plan anything grand. He just wanted to walk without being watched. He slipped through corridors lit by moonlight and quiet torch fire. Portraits dozed. Armor stood still. As Harry passed certain archways, he felt the castle's wards brush him, then hesitate. Not alarmed. Confused. Like Hogwarts couldn't quite find him in the rules. Harry's heartbeat sped up. The cloak wasn't just invisibility. It was exemption. A loophole. Harry wandered deeper, letting the castle guide him with its shifting staircases and moody hallways. Then he found a room he'd never seen before. The door wasn't locked, but it hummed faintly, like it had something inside it that remembered being guarded. Harry pushed it open. Inside was a tall mirror standing on clawed feet. It looked ancient, the gold frame carved with strange symbols. Not Norse, not exactly, more like a blend of old magical languages, layered like history. Carved at the top, in crooked letters, were words Harry couldn't fully parse at first. Then they resolved in his mind like a puzzle clicking into place. Eris Drower Tays. Harry frowned. He stepped closer, and the mirror brightened. Not with light, with attention. Harry stared into it and saw himself. Only it wasn't just him. Behind him stood a woman with bright red hair, smiling so softly it made Harry's throat close. A man with messy hair and glasses, laughing like he couldn't believe he got to be happy. Harry's knees went weak. "Mum?" he whispered. The woman Lily smiled at him like she'd been smiling all along. Harry pressed a hand to the mirror. His palm didn't feel cold glass. It felt distance, like a law that said, you may see, you may not touch. Behind Lily and James were others people Harry didn't recognize, but somehow knew were his. Grandparents, maybe. Faces that looked like his in subtle ways. Harry's chest ached so hard he thought it might split. Then, for the briefest heartbeat, he saw something else. Not in the background. Not behind his parents. Above. A shadow of a vast tree whose branches filled the sky. A raven perched, watching. And behind that, a tall one-eyed figure, half seen, like the mirror itself hesitated to show him. The figure's gaze met Harry's through the glass. Harry's skin prickled. The knot in his chest tightened sharply. And the mirror's surface rippled, like it was trying to decide what Harry wanted most. Harry stumbled back, breath shaking. His parents didn't fade. They stayed there, smiling, waiting. Harry stayed until his legs went numb. Until the ache behind his ribs became unbearable. Until he heard a soft footstep behind him. Harry spoon, kluak rusling. Dumbledore stood in the doorway, robes calm, eyes bright. He wasn't surprised. He looked sad. So, Dumbledore said gently, you have found the mirror of Arist. Harry swallowed, throat raw. It shows them. Yes, Dumbledore said, stepping closer. His voice was warm, but there was steel in it too, the kind adults use when they're trying to save you from yourself. It shows the deepest, most desperate desire of your heart. Harry stared at the mirror again. I just want. I know, Dumbledore said softly. Harry's scar prickled faintly. Dumbledore's gaze flicked to it, then back to Harry's eyes. But the mirror gives neither knowledge nor truth, Dumbledore continued. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they saw, or driven mad by what they did not. Harry's voice shook. Why is it here? Dumbledore's smile was faint. Because Hogwarts collects many things. Some by intention, some by accident, some because they're safer inside these walls than outside them. Harry thought of Fluffy, of the trapdoor, of the hunger wrap package. He whispered, is it connected? Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, but not in humor. In this castle, he said carefully, many things are connected, Harry. Harry's hands clenched in the cloak. I saw something else. Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but the air did subtly, like Dumbledore had leaned on an invisible rule. You saw what? Dumbledore asked. Harry hesitated, because he didn't want to say one-eyed man out loud, because saying it felt like calling something nearer. I don't know, Harry lied. The words left his mouth and tasted wrong instantly. The knot in his chest tugged sharp, unpleasant like it disapproved. Dumbledore watched him for a long moment. Then he sighed very softly. Honesty is not always easy, Harry, but it is always cleaner. Harry's cheeks burned. He swallowed. I saw a raven, and a man, one eye. Dumbledore went still. Not dramatically, just a pause too precise to be nothing. Then his voice stayed gentle. And how did that make you feel? Harry stared at the mirror's frame. Like, I was being remembered. Dumbledore's gaze softened, and something heavy passed behind his eyes. That, Dumbledore said quietly, is an uncomfortable feeling. He placed a hand on Harry's shoulder light. Careful, permission rather than control. Come, Dumbledore said. It is late, and this mirror is not a friend to the lonely. Harry let Dumbledore guide him out. As they left, Harry looked back once. His parents smiled at him from the glass. And for a heartbeat, the one-eyed figure stood behind them again, just long enough for Harry to feel the weight of that gaze like a hand on his spine. Then the door closed. The humming stopped, but the feeling didn't. The lattice beneath the trapdoor. The next week, Hermione returned, and the first thing she did was notice Harry looked different. Less haunted than he should. More awake than he wanted. Harry told them about the cloak. Ron nearly fainted. Hermione's eyes gleamed like she'd found religion. Harry, That's an invisibility cloak. Not a disillusionment charm, an actual cloak. Do you know how rare? Ron cut in. We're using it. Hermione glared. For research. Ron nodded solemnly. For crimes. Harry snorted despite himself. That night, under the cloak, they crept back to the third-floor corridor. Fluffy slept this time, heads drooping, drool puddling on stone. Harry's stomach tightened anyway. As they tiptoed past, Harry noticed the runic scratches again carved into the stone near the trapdoor. Hermione leaned close, whispering, "Those aren't Hogwarts standard ward runes." Harry's pulse quickened. I know, because he could feel them. Not as spells, as structure. A lattice of rules layered together. Keep out, keep in, only by condition, only by sacrifice. Harry didn't understand how he understood that he just did, the way you understand when someone is glaring at you without seeing their face. Ron whispered, "So what's under it?" Harry stared at the trapdoor. His scar prickled faintly. Not pain. Hunger's echo. Something, Harry whispered back, that the castle is trying very hard not to spill. They didn't open it. Not tonight. Because Harry could already feel the cost of pushing at those laws without permission. Instead, they backed away. And as they turned a corner, voices drifted toward them from the shadows ahead. Sharp, low, angry. Snape. And Quirrell. Harry's blood went cold. They pressed flat against the wall, hidden by the cloak, barely breathing. You are incompetent, Snape hissed. Quirrell's voice trembled. I'm doing my best. Your best is pathetic, Snape snapped. Someone attempted entry again. Someone with unusual magic. Harry's fingers clenched. Snape continued, voice silky and dangerous. Tell me what you're really doing, Quirrell. Are you after it? There was a pause too long. Then Quirrell whispered, almost inaudible, you don't understand. Snape's voice went colder. Oh, I understand far more than you think. Quirrell made a strange sound like a swallow choked halfway down. And then, a second voice slid into the corridor. Not spoken. Felt. A cold pressure that made Harry's scar flare hot for a heartbeat. Ron stiffened under the cloak. Hermione's hand clamped over her own mouth. Quirrell's shoulders straightened unnaturally, like a puppet's strings had been pulled tight. He spoke again, but the tremble was gone. No, Quirrell said softly. And Harry knew, in his bones, that it wasn't Quirrell speaking anymore. Snape's posture tightened. What did you say? Quirrell smiled. A small, wrong smile. I said. He repeated, voice smooth as oil, you're not the only one who knows how to break rules. Harry's chest not yanked hard, like it wanted to recoil. For a split second, Quirrell's head turned. Not toward Snape. Toward the space where Harry stood under the cloak. Toward him. Harry's breath stopped. Because Quirrell's eyes didn't look like a stuttering professor's eyes. They looked like something ancient peering through human glass. Then Quirrell turned away again, as if he'd merely tasted the air. Snape's voice sharpened, suspicious. Who's there? Harry's ash disc warmed in his pocket like a warning bell. Hermione squeezed Harry's wrist hard, grounding him. Ron barely breathed. Snape's wand flicked. A spell hissed past them, slicing the air where they stood. And for a heartbeat, Harry felt the cloak's rules hold. The spell didn't miss. It slid off them like water off oil. The air chilled. Snape paused, frowning. Then, reluctantly, he lowered his wand. There is nothing, Snape said, but he didn't sound convinced. Quirrell's wrong smile lingered. Perhaps, he murmured, some secrets are simply better hidden. They walked away. Footsteps fading into the castle's shifting distance. Only when the corridor was silent again did Harry inhale. His lungs burned. Hermione whispered, voice shaking, Harry, he looked right at us. Ron swallowed hard. That wasn't Quirrell. Harry's scar throbbed faintly. and under his skin, pale gold embers stirred like something waking from a long sleep. Because whatever had been inside Quirrell for that moment had noticed Harry. Hermione came back from Christmas break like a storm with a timetable. She hugged Harry once quick, awkward, like she didn't want anyone to see her do it, and then immediately started interrogating him as if affection was simply the opening act. "You look thinner," she said, eyes narrowing. "Have you been eating properly?" Ron snorted. "He eats like a bird." Hermione didn't even look at Ron. "That's not an answer." Harry gave her a helpless shrug. "I eat." Hermione's gaze flicked to his face, too pale, too tired then to his hands. "How many times did you use the rune disc while I was gone?" Harry hesitated. Ron cut in, because Ron was allergic to silence. "He used it once, maybe twice, and he nearly fell over afterwards." Hermione's jaw set. "I told you not to push without supervision." Harry's cheeks warmed. "I didn't push. I just needed it." Hermione's expression softened a fraction. "I know." Then it sharpened again immediately. "But we still need to understand what it's doing to you." Ron leaned back in his chair dramatically. "Welcome back, Hermione. Great to have you." Hermione ignored him so hard it was almost an art. Harry didn't mind. Not really. Because understanding was the first real kindness anyone had ever offered him about the strange thing under his skin. And lately, that strange thing felt less like a secret and more like a shadow growing longer. The night Quirrell looked through them. They told Hermione everything that evening. The cloak, the forbidden corridor, Snape and Quirrell's argument, and that moment when Quirrell's voice wasn't his. Hermione listened with her hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on Harry like she was measuring the truth of every word. When Ron described Quirrell turning his head toward them under the cloak, Hermione went pale. "He sensed you?" she whispered. Harry's scar throbbed faintly, as if it didn't like being remembered. "I think," Harry said slowly, that something in him recognized the knot. Hermione swallowed. "Or recognized you." Ron rubbed his arms. "So we got a three-headed murder dog guarding a trapdoor, a stuttering teacher who might be possessed by something, and Snape acting like a bat with a grudge." Hermione's eyes snapped to him. "And we still don't know what's under the trapdoor." Ron gestured wildly. "Obviously something bad." Harry stared at the table, fingers worrying the edge of his sleeve. He could still feel that brown paper package Hagrid had snatched from the high-security vault. Not as a memory, as a taste. Like the world had brushed his tongue with the idea of hunger and said, "Remember this." Hermione leaned forward, voice low. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the runes carved into the stone near Fluffy." Harry looked up. "They weren't Hogwarts, were they?" Hermione shook her head. "No. Hogwarts wards have patterns Latin-based structures, Celtic influences, some Norman-era additions. Those scratches were different, layered like someone was reinforcing rules with something older." Ron made a face. "Older than Hogwarts?" Hermione hesitated. "Possibly." Harry's chest not tightened slightly, like it had been called by name. Hermione exhaled and pulled a stack of notes from her bag. "I made a list while I was home. Any names we've heard that didn't make sense." Ron groaned. "Oh no." Hermione ignored him. She tapped the parchment. "The biggest one is Nicholas Flamel." Harry's heart gave a small jolt. Ron blinked. "Who?" "Exactly," Hermione said sharply. "We've searched every reference book in the library and found nothing. But Hagrid mentioned the package came from Vault 713, and that's a vault used for highly protected magical artifacts. That suggests the thing is rare enough to be banked like a dragon hoard." Ron frowned. "So where do we find Flamel?" Hermione's eyes gleamed. "We already have." Harry blinked. "We do." Hermione reached in her bag and produced something Harry hadn't seen in weeks, a crumpled chocolate frog card. Ron's eyes widened. "You kept that?" Hermione said, as if to a particularly slow toddler, "Of course I kept it." She smoothed it carefully on the table. On the front was a picture of Albus Dumbledore, smiling mildly, twinkling at the camera like he knew a joke no one else was ready for. Hermione flipped it over and pointed. "Nicholas Flamel," she said, voice triumphant. "It's right there in the footnotes." Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner. Hermione didn't smile often when she was right. She didn't need to. Her whole face did this sharp, satisfied thing like a lock clicking into place, and honestly, it was somehow scarier than Ron screaming. She stabbed the back of the chocolate frog card with her finger again, just in case Harry's eyes were lying. "Read it," she ordered. Harry leaned in. There it was printed in tiny, smug text. And his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Ron blinked slowly. That was on the card the whole time? Hermione gave him a look that could curdle milk. Yes. Ron threw his hands up. Why do we even have a library then? Hermione ignored the philosophical crisis and turned to Harry, eyes bright. Do you know what alchemy means? Harry hesitated. Turning stuff into other stuff? Ron nodded like that was obviously correct. Like turning homework into suffering. Hermione's lips twitched. Sure, but real alchemy, wizard alchemy, is mostly about one thing. She lowered her voice, like saying it louder might summon it. Immortality. Harry's scar prickled faintly. Not pain. A warning itch, like his body didn't like the word. Ron's face went pale. Immortality, like living forever? Hermione nodded, and her voice turned crisp and precise. Nicholas Flamel is famous for creating the Philosopher's Stone. It can turn metal into gold and produce the elixir of life, which keeps you from dying. Ron stared. That's real? Hermione pointed at the card like it had personally validated her existence. It's in print. That's as close as we get to real around here. Harry's stomach tightened. A stone that makes you immortal. A package from the most secure vault in Gringotts. A three-headed dog guarding a trapdoor. And Quirrell with someone else in his eyes, sniffing the air like he was hunting a scent. Harry's voice came out quietly. That's what they're protecting. Hermione nodded. That's what they're protecting. Ron swallowed hard. And that's what someone's trying to steal. Harry didn't say it, but all three of them were thinking the same name. Quirrell. Or whatever wore Quirrell like a coat. The way the world starts pricing you. After that, Hermione went into full research mode, which meant their evenings became a rotating schedule of library, notes, arguing, more library. Harry, stop rubbing your scar. You'll irritate it. Ron complaining about books like they were a personal attack. And Harry feeling like the castle was quietly moving chess pieces around them. But there was another thing happening too. Something Harry didn't mention at first because it sounded insane even in his own head. The more he used runes, even tiny, control ones like Algies, the more the world seemed to notice him differently. Not people. The world. Doors paused for him the way they paused for headmasters. Wards brushed him and didn't just resist, they tested. Like he wasn't a child walking through them anymore. Like he was a clause in a contract they hadn't finished reading. It made his skin crawl. It made the knot in his chest tighten, not with power, but with weight. One afternoon, Harry and Ron were walking back from herbology when Filch appeared out of nowhere, glaring. Out of line again, are we? Filch hissed, lifting his lantern like it could accuse them. Ron groaned. We're literally walking to class. Filch sniffed and moved closer. Harry's ash disc warmed faintly in his pocket, not hot, just awake. Filch's lantern swung, and then the chain on it snapped. The lantern dropped safely into Filch's hands like it had decided not to break. Filch stared at it, confused, then suspiciously at Harry. Harry felt a tiny, invisible tug in his chest, like the world had done him a favor. Not free, not kind, a favor with an implied price. Harry quickened his pace until Filch's muttering faded behind them. Ron whispered, that was lucky. Harry didn't answer. because it hadn't felt like luck. It felt like the world going fine. But you owe. The most important rule, don't make promises. That night, Harry dreamed of the tree again. The vast branches, the cold iron soil, the raven with one silver eye perched above him like it owned the sky. This time, it wasn't alone. The one-eyed figure stood closer, cloak moving like storm clouds made into fabric. When the figure spoke, it wasn't English. It wasn't even words. It was meaning that arrived in Harry's bones. You are waking. Harry's throat went tight. I didn't choose this. The figure's one eye narrowed, not angry, but amused, like a king listening to a child explain gravity. No, but you will choose what you pay. Harry swallowed. Pay. The raven clicked its beak once. The sound echoed like a hammer on metal. And suddenly Harry understood something terrifying. Runic magic didn't just cost energy. It created obligations. Vows, balances, debts. If you wrote a rule into the world remembered that you were the sort of being who made rules. And it treated you accordingly. Harry's chest tightened around the knot. What do you want? The figure didn't answer directly. Instead, the ground in front of Harry shifted, and a simple rune burned into the soil pale gold. A protection mark. All Jais. Then a second rune. One Harry didn't know, but his bones reacted to it like a bruise. Oath. Then a third. A sharp, angled symbol that felt like a door closing. Bind. The figure's gaze pinned him. Speak, and it will hold. Refuse, and you stay only a boy. Harry's mouth went dry. He could feel the temptation like heat in his palm. Make a vow, get power, stop being helpless. And somewhere deep inside him, the boy who'd lived in a cupboard wanted to grab that power with both hands and never let go. But Dumbledore's voice echoed in his mind, quiet and serious. Do not make promises you cannot keep. Harry clenched his fists. I refuse, Harry said, voice shaking but real. I'm not making an oath in a dream. The raven's silver eye gleamed. The figure studied him. Then, slowly, the runes in the soil dimmed. Not angry. Not disappointed. Like a test result filed away. Good, the meaning whispered, almost approving. You're not foolish. Harry woke with his heart pounding. His palms stung faintly, as if he'd held something hot and let it go. He stared at the canopy above his bed and whispered into the dark, I'm not a contract. But the knot in his chest tightened, as if it wasn't fully convinced. The plan, that wasn't a plan yet. Hermione finally connected the last dots over breakfast on a Tuesday. If someone steals the stone, she said, stirring her porridge like it was an enemy, they won't just get gold. They'll get time. Forever. Which means whoever's after won't stop. Ron grimaced. So we tell Dumbledore. Hermione hesitated. Harry watched her carefully. Why are you hesitating? Hermione frowned. Because Dumbledore already knows. He put Fluffy there. He built the protections. He brought the stone into the school. Ron frowned harder. Then why isn't he stopping it? Harry's scar prickled faintly again. Hermione lowered her voice. Maybe he's trying. Maybe he's watching. Or maybe he's waiting for whoever's trying to steal it to reveal themselves. Ron's eyes widened. So we're bait. Hermione didn't deny it. Harry sat very still. Because something about that felt familiar. Adults making plans. Kids being part of the plan without being told. His chest tightened with that old, sour feeling of being managed. I don't like being bait, Harry said quietly. Hermione looked at him, and for once she didn't rush to logic. Her voice softened. Me either. Ron leaned in, serious now. So what do we do? Silence hovered. And then Harry realized something he hadn't wanted to realize. If Quirrell, or the thing in Quirrell, was truly trying to steal the stone, then it wasn't just a school mystery anymore. It was a fight over immortality. And Harry's scar, the piece of Voldemort that lived under it, had already proven one thing. This wasn't a story that let him sit on the sidelines. Harry's fingers closed around the ash disc in his pocket. He hated how natural that motion felt. Hermione watched him do it and swallowed. Harry. Harry exhaled. We keep watching. Ron nodded, grim. We keep watching. Hermione's eyes sharpened. And we find out what the protections are. All of them. Because if someone's going to try, they'll have to get through. A whole obstacle course, Ron muttered. Hermione snapped her fingers. Exactly. Harry's stomach dipped, because he could still feel the runic lattice under that trapdoor. Rules layered like bones. And those rules weren't just preventing entry. They were waiting for someone to try. A test of the trapdoor. That night, under the cloak, they went back. Fluffy was half asleep, one head snoring while another head watched the room with lazy, suspicious eyes. Harry's whole body went tight. They moved like thieves, breath held. The trapdoor sat beneath Fluffy like a secret under a monster. Hermione knelt at the edge, whispering, "There's a locking charm." And something else, something like a condition, Harry murmured. Hermione blinked. How did you? Harry didn't answer because he didn't fully know. He placed his palm lightly on the wood, not pushing, just listening. The knot in his chest tightened, and the world delivered meaning like a cold coin pressed into his hand. Only by sacrifice, only by courage, only by choice. Harry flinched. Ron whispered, "What's it doing?" Harry swallowed. "It's written." Hermione's eyes widened, like runes. Harry nodded once. And that's when Fluffy's middle head lifted. Its nostrils flared. It sniffed the air slowly once, twice, like it could smell the difference between ordinary children and something older pretending to be a boy. Harry froze. The ash disc warmed sharply in his pocket. Protection. Hold. Don't be seen. Harry didn't carve anything, didn't draw. He just focused on that steady, intent babbling had drilled into him. Keep harm away. Keep us unnoticed. The disc pulsed once through fabric, and Fluffy's head hesitated. It blinked. Then, with a bored huff, it lowered its head again. Harry's knees nearly gave out from relief. Hermione grabbed his sleeve, eyes frantic. "Harry, don't undo that too much. You'll—" "I know," Harry whispered. And he did know, because the cost hit him immediately: lightheadedness, that hollow ache behind his ribs. Not enough to collapse. Enough to remind him, every time the world helps you, it expects a balancing act. They backed away carefully and left, hearts hammering. They didn't notice the portrait in the corner until the last second. A painted witch with sharp eyes and tighter lips watched them slip past. Her gaze didn't follow Ron or Hermione. It followed Harry. And when they were gone, she whispered to the empty corridor, "He's waking. Someone else makes a move." The next morning, Harry found a note on his bed. No out. Not even. Just parchment folded once, placed neatly as if someone had been standing in their dormitory for a moment and left without a sound. Harry's stomach dropped. He unfolded it. "Mr. Potter, your curiosity is admirable. Your timing is not. Meet me tonight at 11. Alone. SS." Ron squinted at it. S.S. Hermione went pale. Severe as Snape. Harry's ash disc warmed faintly, like it didn't like the idea at all. Ron swore. Absolutely not. Hermione's mind was already racing. He might suspect you. Or he might be trying to protect the stone. Or he might be trying to use Harry. Ron snapped. Harry stared at the note. He felt the castle's wards brushing him like fingers, subtle and curious. He felt that contract feeling again, like the world was pricing him. And he realized the worst part. If Snape had noticed, then whatever lived behind Quirrell's eyes had definitely noticed too. Harry folded the note carefully, like it might cut him if he didn't respect it. "I'm going," Harry said quietly. Ron's face twisted. "Harry." Harry looked at them both, voice steadier than he felt. "If I don't, Snape will do what adults always do. Hermione swallowed. What's that? Harry's jaw tightened. Decide for me. The knot in his chest tightened like a warning bell. And far away, far beyond Hogwarts, thunder rolled in a clear sky, like something ancient approved of the word choice. At 10:59, Hogwarts felt like it was pretending to sleep. The portraits had gone drowsy and grumpy. The torches burned lower, as if conserving their own patience. The moving staircases slowed to a lazy crawl. Harry didn't trust it. He stood at the edge of his dormitory bed, Snape's note folded tight in his fist, like paper could somehow keep the fear contained. Meet me tonight at 11. Alone. Ron had argued until his face went red. Hermione had gone quiet in that frightening way she did when she wanted to argue but didn't have enough information to do it properly. Harry still went. He didn't say goodbye. That would make it feel like a goodbye. He just waited until Ron's breathing evened out and Neville started snoring softly, then slipped the invisibility cloak over his shoulders and became a ghost. Not because he planned to spy, because he wasn't stupid. Snape didn't say, "Don't bring the cloak." Snape said alone. And the cloak wasn't a person. It was a loophole. Hogwarts respected loopholes. Harry walked. As he passed a suit of armor, it shifted, then stilled again, confused. As he crossed a doorway, the air tightened, then relaxed, like it couldn't find a reason to object. The cloak made the castle's wards treat him like a missing line in a spell. And for once, Harry liked not being noticed. Until he reached the dungeon corridor and felt the temperature drop. Not because it was underground, because someone had written rules here too. Sharper ones. Meaner ones. Harry stopped outside Snape's office door. The doorknob was cold as a coin. The ash disk in his pocket warmed faintly, like it didn't like this place. Harry lifted a hand to knock. The door opened on its own. Snape stood there, expression unreadable in the torchlight. Dark robes, dark eyes, dark patience. "Come in," Snape said. Harry stepped inside. The door shut behind him with the soft finality of a vault closing. Snape's gaze snapped to the space where Harry stood under the cloak. He didn't hesitate, didn't guess, didn't bluff. "Remove it," Snape said, voice flat. Harry's stomach dropped. Slowly, he pulled the cloak back. Snape's eyes flicked over him like a scalpel. "I said alone," Snape murmured. "I'm alone," Harry said carefully. "The cloak isn't." "A tool," Snape finished unimpressed. "A loophole." "Yes, you Gryffindors adore those." Harry held the cloak tighter, half defiant. "You didn't say not to." Snape's lip twitched, not quite a smile. "Noted," he said. "Seat." Harry sat in the chair by Snape's desk, spine straight, hands clenched. Snape moved around the room, drawing his wand with a casual motion that still made Harry's nerves jump. He traced a quick circle in the air. The office's candles steadied. The shadows thickened. The air sealed. Harry felt it as a pressure around his ears like the room had been wrapped in a muffling charm. "No eavesdropping," Snape said, more to himself than to Harry. "No portraits. No helpful ghosts. No curious headmasters who pretend not to listen." Harry swallowed. "Professor, why am I here?" Snape turned slowly. "For the same reason you are always in danger, Potter," Snape said quietly. "Because you are loud without speaking." Harry blinked. "What does that mean?" Snape's gaze dropped to Harry's right hand. "Show me your palm." Harry hesitated. Snape's voice sharpened. "Now." Harry opened his hand. Nothing showed on the skin. But Snape didn't look at the surface. He looked through it, like he expected to see heat under flesh. His eyes narrowed. "You've been marked," Snape said. Harry's mouth went dry. "By the wand?" Snape's gaze flicked up cold. "By something older than the wand." Harry felt the knot in his chest tighten hard, like it had been named. Snape continued, voice clipped, controlled. "Professor Babbling contacted me." Harry's stomach dropped further. "She did?" "She is cautious," Snape said, almost grudgingly. So am I. Harry frowned. I thought you hated me. Snape's eyes flashed anger, or something like it. I hate many things, Snape said softly. That is not relevant. Harry didn't believe that, but he stayed quiet. Snape reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin slate black, smooth, the size of a notebook. He set on the desk between them. Right, Snape said. Harry stared. Right what? A rune, Snape said, and his voice made the word feel dangerous. The one you used on Malfoy. The one that compelled truth. Harry's heart thudded. I don't, Harry began. Snape's eyes cut him off. Do not pretend innocence. You can do it. Harry's fingers curled. He could feel the ash disc in his pocket like a warning. I don't want to, Harry said quietly. Snape paused, as if that answer didn't fit the version of Harry he'd built in his head. Good, Snape said, and for a moment his voice softened into something almost approving. Because that rune is poison. Harry blinked. Poison? Snape leaned forward slightly. Do you know what you did when you compelled Malfoy? Harry swallowed. I made him tell the truth. No, Snape said sharply. You made the world enforce truth through him. Harry's stomach twisted. Snape continued, voice low. You did not cast a spell that affected Malfoy. You wrote a constraint that affected the air, the room, the conversation itself. Harry remembered the silence, the way Malfoy's lie had stuck. Snape's eyes narrowed. That is not normal rune work. Hogwarts runes are academic protective scripts, ward structures, stable patterns built to sit under wandcraft. What you did is closer to law. Harry's chest tightened. Babbling said that. Snape's mouth turned grim. Babbling is kind. I'm not. Harry's throat went tight. Snape tapped the slate once. Listen carefully, Potter, because this is what no one tells children who stumble into old magic. Harry didn't blink. Snape's voice dropped even lower. Runes are not spells. Runes are bargains. Harry's scar prickled faintly. Snape's gaze flicked to it, and bargains, once noticed, attract collectors. Harry swallowed. Collectors? Snape's expression tightened. Beings, powers, traditions, old things that treat language like currency. Harry's mind flashed to the dream, the raven, the tree, the one-eyed figure. Snape watched him closely, like he could see the thought flicker across Harry's face. Ah, Snap murmure. So you've been dreaming. Harry's blood went cold. How do you? Snape's eyes sharpened. Because the first symptom of being touched by a foreign rule set is that you start hearing it in sleep. Harry stared at him. Foreign rule set? Snape didn't answer directly. Instead, he moved to a shelf and pulled down an old book bound in cracked leather. He opened it to a page of diagrams, runes drawn in neat ink, with annotations in tight handwriting. He set it in front of Harry. For tears, Snape said, tapping the page with one long finger. Harry leaned in despite himself. 1. Carve medium safe. Slow. Uses the object as a sink. 2. 3. Threshold script doors. Frames. Floors. Stronger. Cost more. Lasts longer. 4. 5. Breath/inkless inscription runes drawn in air, heat, or will. Fust. Expensive. Noticeable. 6. 7. Oath runes vows. Names. Binds. Belmano. Unforgiving. 8. Snape's finger landed on the last line. You understand? He asked. Harry swallowed. Tier 4 is promises. Snape's eyes narrowed. Not promises. Contracts. Harry remembered the dream, offering him oath and bind like candy wrapped around a blade. Snape's voice went sharp. If you ever carve an oath rune, if you ever anchor your will to it with blood or name, you may not be able to undo it without something undoing you. Harry's mouth went dry. Why are you telling me this? Snape stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, because someone is already trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone, and you are the sort of key old locks a door. Harry's stomach dropped. So it is the stone. Snape's eyes flickered, annoyance at himself for confirming it. Do not repeat that, Snape snapped. And do not say it where walls can hear. Harry's voice came out rough. Quirrell is trying. Snape's expression hardened. Quirrell is compromised. Harry's scar throbbed faintly, like it agreed. Snape's eyes locked onto Harry's forehead. And the thing compromising him is not clever because it is powerful. Harry's heart pounded. It's... Do not, Snape said, cutting him off like a blade. Say the name. Names are hooks. Harry swallowed the word back. His throat burned. Snape leaned closer. Now you understand why I called you here. Harry's fingers curled on his knees. To tell me to stay away. Yes, Snape said simply. Harry stared up at him. And if I don't? Snape's eyes narrowed. Then you'll be used. Harry's chest tightened. Like bait. Snape's mouth thinned. Like leverage. The difference made Harry feel sick. Snape straightened and walked to his desk drawer again. He pulled something out and set it down with a soft clink. It was a simple iron ring. Heavy, plain, cold. Carved into it was a single rune straight line with a small notch, simple, harsh. Harry's skin prickled at it. ISA, Snape said. Ice. Stillness. Restraint. Harry frowned. What does it do? It dampens, Snape said. Not your wand magic. Your other inheritance. Harry stared at him. You think I have? Snape cut him off, voice low and furious. I think you're a beacon that doesn't know it's lit. Harry's throat tightened. Snape pushed the ring closer. Wear it when you feel the knot tighten, when you feel the urge to write rules. Harry hesitated, then picked it up. The moment the iron touched his skin, the warmth under his ribs dulled. Not gone, but quieter, like embers banked under ash. Harry exhaled shakily, realizing he'd been tense for weeks without knowing it. Snape watched him with a sharp, satisfied look. Good. You feel it. Harry looked up. You knew it would work. Snape's voice went colder. I have seen stranger protections than yours. Harry's fingers tightened around the ring. Why help me? For a heartbeat. Snape's face flickered something raw beneath the bitterness. Then it vanished. You are a student at Hogwarts, Snape said. And whatever you are not a weapon for Dark Lords to pick up. Harry stared, heart pounding. Snape's eyes narrowed. And you will not be the reason I fail to stop him. Harry blinked. Stop him? Snape's jaw tightened. My job, he said, with a bitterness that tasted like old scars, is to stand between monsters and children, even if the children insist on sprinting toward the monsters. Harry's cheeks warmed. I'm not sprinting. Snape's look was deadpan. You broke curfew to stalk a three-headed dog. Harry had no defense for that. Snape sighed sharply, like his patience physically hurt. Then the air in the room shifted. Not dramatic. A subtle tightening like a net being tugged from far away. Snape froze. His head turned slightly toward the door, eyes narrowing. Harry felt it too. The knot in his chest pulled hard. Not toward Snape. Toward the third floor. Toward the trapdoor. Toward the hunger-hidden thing. Snape's wand was in his hand instantly. Stay, Snape snapped. Harry's heart hammered. What is it? Snape's voice was clipped. Someone has triggered a ward. Harry stood, despite himself. Quirrell. Snape shot him a look that could have cut stone. I said stay. Harry swallowed, but his body felt like it was being pulled by gravity. Snape saw it. His expression tightened. Then, with clear disgust at his own decision, Snape grabbed Harry's shoulder. Fine, znape isid, but you do exactly as I say, or I will personally transfigure you into something small enough to fit in my pocket. Harry managed a shaky, yes, professor. Snape muttered a curse under his breath and swept out of the office. Harry hurried after him, shoving the cloak around himself as he went. Snape didn't tell him to stop. He just moved faster. The attempt. Hogwarts corridors at night felt different when an adult was angry. The castle didn't merely allow Snape to pass. It parted. Doors swung open a heartbeat before he reached them. Staircases aligned like they were trying to be helpful for once. Portraits pretended to sleep harder. Harry, under the cloak, struggled to keep up. The ISA ring chilled his skin, grounding him, but he still felt the pull like the third floor was a magnet and his blood was iron. They reached the forbidden corridor. Fluffy was awake. All three heads lifted, nostrils flaring, teeth glinting. But the dog wasn't snarling at them. It was snarling at the trapdoor. Because the trapdoor wasn't closed. It was ajar just enough to show darkness beneath. And on the stone around it, the runic lattice Harry had felt before was humming. Not glowing. Humming with tension like a tightened string. Hermione's voice echoed in Harry's mind. Those aren't Hogwarts standard ward runes. Harry believed that more than ever now. Snape stepped forward, wand raised. Fluffy's head snapped toward him, but Snape spoke a low, sharp command. The left head hesitated. The right head whined. Snape's spell wasn't a charm so much as a statement of authority. Fluffy backed up a step, growling. Harry's heart hammered, because he felt at the lattice under the trapdoor, testing Snape too. Not hostile, just reading. Authorized, condition met, price paid. Snape's jaw tightened. He didn't go down. Instead, he cast a string of spells, thin, controlled, invisible threads that slid under the trapdoor like probes. Then he went still. His eyes narrowed. Someone is already below, Snape said, voice like ice. Harry's breath caught. A soft scraping sound came from the trapdoor edge, like nails on wood. Then a thump from below. Snape's wand snapped upward. Reveal. A flare of light burst around the trapdoor. For a heartbeat, Harry saw it. A shadow moving fast, scrambling up. Not Fluffy. Something human-shaped. It surged toward the opening, and then stopped like it had hit an invisible wall. The lattice tightened. The air thickened. The shape below hissed an angry, animal sound. Snape's eyes flashed. So he murmured, "You've learned to open it, but not to leave." A voice drifted up from the darkness, trembling and wrong. Professor Snape, what were you doing here?" Quirrell's voice. But the stutter came and went like an act someone kept forgetting to perform. Snape's lip curled. "Go back to bed, Quirrell." A pause. Then Quirrell chuckled softly. It didn't sound like Quirrell. It sounded like a coal man smiling. "I can't," Quirrell said. "Not when the door is already open." Harry's scar flared hot for a heartbeat. The ISA ring chilled against his finger in response, like it was trying to keep him from flaring back. Snape's gaze sharpened. "Close it," Snape snapped. Quirrell's voice went almost playful. "If you close it, you won't know what I've learned." Snape's jaw clenched. Harry felt the pull in his chest tighten into something worse. Because the lattice under the trapdoor shifted. It was reacting not to Quirrell's words, to Harry's presence. Even under the cloak, even trying to hide, something about Harry was a note the wards could hear. The runes seemed to hum in recognition, like they'd found a familiar language in the room. Snape's head snapped slightly, as if he sensed it too. And for a terrifying heartbeat, Harry thought Snape might turn and look straight at him under the cloak again. Instead, Snape spat, "You won't take it." Quirrell sighed, "Not tonight." Then the darkness below shifted with sudden speed. A rush of air, a scraping sound, something falling then catching. And Quirrell's voice came faintly, receding. But soon, Snape's wand snapped downward, casting a binding spell into the trapdoor opening. The lattice flared once sharp, pale then settled, as if it had decided, not yet. Snape slammed the trapdoor shut with a forceful gesture. The wood thudded into place. The hum eased. Fluffy's heads lowered, still growling, but calmer. Snape stood very still, breathing controlled. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward the space where Harry stood. Harry froze, so hard it hurt. Snape's eyes narrowed. He didn't see Harry's body, but he saw the effect, the subtle disturbance of rules around a boy who made rules. Snape's voice went deadly soft. "Potter," he said, not looking directly at him, "if you're here, if you followed me." Harry's throat tightened. He pulled the cloak back just enough to show his face. Snape's eyes flashed with anger, so sharp it almost felt like heat. "You absolute Snape," stopped himself, jaw flexing, as if he was restraining language that wanted to be violent. Potter whispered, "I'm sorry." Snape's nostrils flared. "Do you know what nearly happened?" Harry swallowed. He almost got out. Snape's eyes went colder. "No." Harry blinked. Snape stepped closer, voice low and ruthless. "He almost realized the door likes you." Harry went ice cold. Snape's gaze drilled into him. "Those protections are layered. They test intent. They test courage. They test sacrifice." Harry felt sick. Snape continued, "But they also recognize certain structures, certain ways of writing reality." Harry's fingers tightened around the cloak. "Runes." Snape's mouth thinned. "Old law." Harry's chest not tightened like a fist. Snape leaned in, voice like a blade whispering. "If he realizes you can speak the same language as those wards, if he realizes you're a shortcut, then he will not merely try to kill you." Harry's throat went dry. "What'll he do?" Snape's eyes were flat. "He would try to own you." Harry's stomach turned. Snape straightened and swept his gaze over the corridor, as if checking for listening walls. "Go," Snape snapped. "Back to your bed. Now." Harry hesitated. Snape's eyes narrowed. "Do not argue." Harry swallowed hard and nodded, pulling the cloak around himself again. As he turned to go, Snape spoke one last time, quieter. "And Potter?" Harry paused. Snape's voice was low, grim, almost honest. "If you see a raven in your dreams," Snape said, "do not answer it with oaths." Harry's breath caught. Because Snape shouldn't know that. But Snape did. And that meant the thing inside Harry wasn't just waking. It was leaving tracks. The headmaster leaves. The next morning, the Great Hall buzzed with a different kind of tension. Owls swooped in too fast. Professors spoke too quietly. McGonagall's mouth was set in a hard line that made even loud second years chew more quietly. At breakfast, Hermione slid into her seat beside Harry, eyes immediately scanning him. "You're pale," she hissed. "What happened last night?" Ron leaned in too, whispering, "Did Snape murder you?" Harry swallowed a mouthful of toast that suddenly felt like sand. He didn't want to tell them everything, not because he didn't trust them, but because saying it out loud felt like taking a secret and hanging it on a hook where something could smell it. So he told them the shortest version. "Snape thinks Quirrell tried," Harry whispered. "He stopped it." Hermione's eyes widened. "He stopped it?" Ron frowned. "So Snape's not the bad guy?" Harry's scar prickled faintly. "I don't know what Snape is," Harry admitted, "but he doesn't want the stone taken." Hermione's fingers tightened around her goblet. "Then Quirrell really is the one." Ron swallowed. "We're dead." Before Hermione could scold him for melodrama, Dumbledore stood. The hall quieted. His voice carried easily, warm but edged with seriousness. "Students," Dumbledore said, "I have been called away today on urgent business." Harry's stomach dropped. Hermione's eyes snapped to Harry's. Dumbledore continued, "Professor McGonagall will handle all matters in my absence. Please behave as you always do." A few students laughed nervously. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled briefly, then sharpened. And he added gently, "I would strongly encourage everyone to remain in their common rooms after curfew." Harry felt the knot in his chest tighten. A warning. Because Dumbledore leaving meant something. It meant the board had shifted. Ron whispered, "This feels bad." Hermione whispered back, "Because it is." Harry stared at his plate, appetite gone. He could still feel the trapdoor's hum from last night in his bones. And he could still hear Snape's voice. "The door likes you." Harry's fingers slipped under the table, touching the iron ring on his finger. Isa. Stillness. Restraint. He needed it today, because if the headmaster was gone, then whatever wore Quirrell like a coat would make another move. And Harry had a sinking feeling that next time, the world wouldn't just test him. It would try to draft him. Dumbledore leaving didn't feel like an absence. It felt like the castle had stopped holding its breath. Hogwarts still looked the same: moving staircases, enchanted ceilings, the smell of toast and ink and old stone, but the tension behind it changed. Like the safety net had loosened. Like something in the walls had shifted from protect to observe. Harry noticed small things all day. McGonagall's footsteps were faster than usual. Flitwick kept glancing toward the third-floor staircase like he expected it to bite. Snape's face was set in a hard, quiet fury that made even Slytherins lower their voices. Quirrell. Quirrell looked too calm. Not calm like I'm okay. Calm like someone had already decided how the day would go. Harry's scar prickled more often, little warning sparks under his skin. And the knot in his chest tightened as the hours passed, like it knew the story was accelerating. By evening, Harry could barely focus on dinner. Hermione noticed because Hermione noticed everything. "You're not eating," she murmured. Ron poked at his peas. "I'm eating enough for all of us." Hermione ignored him. "Harry, if you're going to collapse, do it after I finish my pudding." Harry gave her a weak half-smile. "I'll try." But his mind wasn't in the Great Hall. It was under a trapdoor. The cry that turns the key. It happened right after dinner. A commotion near the staff table, sudden movement. A whisper passed like a spark, then McGonagall standing sharply. "Students," she snapped, voice slicing through the hall, "return to your dormitories immediately." The room erupted in confused noise. A boy shouted, "Why?" McGonagall's eyes flashed. "Now." Even Fred and George didn't argue. Harry stood too, but his body felt like it was moving through thick water. Hermione grabbed his sleeve, eyes sharp. "Something's happening." Ron swallowed. "Yeah, that's what it feels like when teachers stop pretending." As the Great Hall emptied, Harry's scar flared hot for a heartbeat. Not pain. A direction. Harry froze mid-step, eyes unfocusing. Hermione caught it immediately. "Harry." Harry whispered, "He's moving." Ron's face went pale. "Who?" Harry didn't say the name. Hermione didn't force it. She just tightened her grip on Harry's sleeve and said, very quietly, "We're not going back to the dorms." Ron stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Hermione." Hermione's gaze didn't waver. "If the stone is in danger right now, and Dumbledore isn't here." Ron cut in, frantic. "We tell McGonagall." Hermione swallowed. "And by the time she believes us, it'll be gone." Harry's chest tightened painfully. The knot wasn't just a knot anymore, it felt like a tether being pulled. Hermione leaned closer, voice fierce and low. "Harry, where is he?" Harry's lips parted. The answer wasn't in his head like a thought. It was in his bones like a compass. "Third floor," Harry whispered, "but not the corridor. Past it." Ron's mouth went dry. "How do you know that?" Harry's stomach rolled. "Because the rules are calling." Hermione went very still. "The wards." Harry nodded once. And then, before any of them could talk themselves out of it, Hermione pulled the invisibility cloak from her bag. Ron blinked. "You had it." Hermione sniffed. "Harry lent it to me to examine. Don't act like you wouldn't steal it if you had the chance." Ron opened his mouth, then closed it because he couldn't deny it. Hermione threw the cloak over all three of them. The world dimmed. The castle's eyes slid off them. And they ran. Fluffy and the split-second choice. The third-floor corridor was colder than usual. The torches burned lower, as if even fire didn't want to be awake for this. Fluffy wasn't asleep. All three heads were up, snarling at the trapdoor. And the trapdoor was open. Not a crack. Open wide. The runic lattice around it hummed like a taut wire. Harry's chestnut yanked so hard he stumbled. Hermione held him up under the cloak. Harry breathed. Ron whispered, voice shaking. How do we get past that? Harry stared at Fluffy. He remembered Hagrid's flute. The one Hagrid gave him for Christmas. Harry's heart kicked. Hagrid, Harry breathed. The flute. Hermione's eyes widened. You brought it? Ron whispered, of course he brought it, Hermione. It's the only thing he owns that isn't trauma. Harry ignored him, digging in his pocket with trembling fingers. He pulled out the crude wooden flute. Fluffy's middle head snapped toward the movement. Harry's scar prickled. Harry lifted the flute to his lips. He didn't know how to play properly. He just blew. A thin, wavering tune drifted through the corridor. It wasn't pretty, but it was sound. And sound, Harry realized with a sudden clarity, was also a kind of rune something carved into air. Fluffy's left head blinked. The right head lowered slightly. The middle head snarled, then faltered. Harry kept playing, breath shaking. Slowly, impossibly, the three heads drooped. The dog's massive body sank, eyelids heavy, breathing slowing. The corridor's tension eased by a fraction. Hermione whispered, awed it worked. Ron whispered, Harry, you're a genius. Harry didn't feel like a genius. He felt like a boy playing a shaky lullaby to a monster guarding immortality. He lowered the flute gently. Fluffy slept. The trapdoor waited. Hermione swallowed. We go down. Ron's voice cracked. We go down? Hermione glared. Unless you'd like to go up and let whoever that was take the stone, yes. Harry stared into the darkness. And something inside him, a cold, older instinct whispered, this door likes you. Harry felt sick. He grabbed the edge of the trapdoor and swung his legs over. The lattice hummed. Not alarmed. Not hostile. It was welcoming in a way that made his skin crawl. Like it recognized him. Like it was happy to see a familiar language enter the conversation. Harry swallowed and dropped. Devil's snare and the first payment. He expected to fall into darkness. Instead, he landed in something soft. Too soft. Vines wrapped around his ankles immediately, then his wrists, then his chest. Ron yelped, what is that? Hermione's voice snapped, sharp through panic. Devil's snare, don't struggle. Ron struggled. The vines tightened. Harry's chest, not tightened too, not with panic, but with the sudden awareness that these were rules again. Devil's snare was a plant, a creature, a thing with a behavior pattern. It had a law. Struggle equals tighten. Calm equals loosen. Harry forced his breathing slow, even though vines were squeezing his ribs. I am calm, rasped. Ron wheezed, I'm not calm. Hermione hissed, light fire devil's snare hates light. She fumbled for her wand. Lumos solum. A burst of light flared. The vines recoiled. They loosened like a fist unclenching. Harry sucked in air, chest burning. Ron gasped, I hate plants. Hermione shot him a look. You hate everything that isn't food. They climbed out of the writhing green and into the next chamber. Harry's hands shook. Not just fear. He felt it, the first payment. Using the flute had taken breath, but not magic. Falling through the lattice had taken something else, a subtle drain, like the door had tagged him as he passed. Not a mark visible on skin. A mark in the world's memory. Harry Potter entered. Harry Potter is relevant. Harry's stomach rolled. Hermione touched his sleeve. Harry, are you okay? Harry nodded too fast. Yeah. He lied. And a knot in his chest tugged unpleasantly, like it didn't like lies. Harry swallowed and tried again. I'm scared. Hermione's expression softened just a little. Me too. Ron muttered, same. And then they moved on. Because there wasn't another option that didn't end with the stone in the wrong hands. Flying keys and the second payment. The next chamber was huge, high ceiling, fluttering wings, the sound of hundreds of tiny metal things moving like angry birds. Keys. Hundreds of enchanted keys. A broomstick sat against the wall. A locked door waited on the far side. Ron stared. Oh, brilliant. We're going to die in a key room. Hermione narrowed her eyes. One key will be different. Look for one with a bent wing. They mounted the brooms. Harry's hands steadied the moment he held the broom handle. Flying was the one thing that always made his body feel like it belonged to him. They took off. The keys swarmed like silver insects. Hermione shouted directions. Ron screamed a lot. Harry focused. He spotted it. A key with one wing slightly crumpled, moving slower than the others. I see it, Harry yelled. He dove. The keys chased him, clinking and slicing the air. He reached, and pain stabbed his palm. Not from the keys. From inside. Harry flinched midair. The broom wobbled. He nearly slammed into the wall. He caught himself at the last second, heart hammering. Hermione yelled, Harry. Harry grit his teeth. The ache behind his ribs deepened. The door's lattice above had taken more than a tag. It had taken a toll for passage like a bridge demanding coin. The deeper they went, the more the protections assumed. If you're here, you're willing to pay. Harry's jaw tightened. He forced his body forward again. He dove harder, caught the bent wing key in his fist, and immediately felt dozens of keys slam into him, battering his arms and shoulders like angry metal birds. Ron shouted, Go, go, go. Harry flew to the door, jammed the key into the lock. It turned. The door swung open. They tumbled through. Harry's lungs burned. His palm throbbed, and that hollowness in his chest widened. A second payment. Wizard chess, the rule that breaks you. The next chamber was colder. A stone chessboard stretched out, pieces carved tall as Ron. Hermione's face went pale. Oh no. Ron stared, half awed, half terrified. It's chess. Harry blinked at him. That's bad. Ron swallowed. It's not just chess. The pieces moved slightly, as if listening. Hermione whispered, We have to play. Ron's jaw tightened. We have to win. He stepped forward and spoke to the pieces like they were soldiers he'd known his whole life. They shifted, clanking into place. A knight bowed its head to Ron. Ron looked back at Harry and Hermione, face serious in a way Harry hadn't seen before. You two, do exactly what I say, Ron whispered. No arguing. Hermione opened her mouth. Ron's eyes snapped. Hermione. Hermione shut it. Ron placed them on the board. Harry stood in the position of a bishop. Hermione stood as a rook. Ron took the place of a knight. The chess pieces across from them raised their stone weapons. The game began. It was terrifying. Not because it was loud, because it was lawful. Each move had consequence. Each piece obeyed a strict rule. Protect the king at any cost. Ron's face was pale with concentration. He guided them, voice tight. Harry moved when told. Hermione moved when told. Stone pieces smashed into each other, shattering with deafening cracks. A stone queen's sword sliced an enemy bishop clean in half. Harry's heart pounded. He could feel the same thing here he felt in runes. Structure, constraint, consequence. Chess was a rune system made of stone and violence. And then Ron's face shifted. Harry saw it before Ron spoke, like Ron had reached a point in the pattern where there was only one way through. Ron whispered, I have to be taken. Hermione's eyes widened. No. Ron's voice snapped, fierce. Yes. Harry's chest tightened. Ron. Ron swallowed, forcing a shaky grin. You're gonna go on, yeah? You're gonna stop him. Hermione's voice cracked. But you'll. Ron shook his head, teeth clenched. If I don't, we lose. Harry stared at Ron, throat burning. He wanted to write a rule. He wanted to carve something into the air that said, no one gets hurt. But that was a lie. And runes hated lies. Ron moved. A stone queen slammed its sword into Ron's knight. Ron flew backward like he'd been hit by a carriage. He hit the floor hard and didn't move. Hermione screamed. Harry's heart dropped into his stomach. He stumbled off the board, rushing to Ron. Ron's eyes fluttered. He was alive, but he was out. Hermione grabbed Harry's sleeve, tears bright. Harry, go. He did it for. Harry's throat closed hard. This was the cruelest thing about rules. They didn't care that you loved someone. They cared that the system held. Harry looked down at Ron, then at Hermione. He whispered, "Stay with him." Hermione nodded fiercely, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Go." Harry stood, legs shaking, and walked through the door beyond the chessboard alone. Each step felt like leaving something behind. Not just Ron. Not just Hermione. The last clean part of childhood. The door that drafts you. The next chamber was small. Dimly. A table with 7 potions. A parchment with a riddle. Fire blocked the door ahead. Fire blocked the door behind. Harry stood there alone, breathing hard. He heard Hermione's voice in his memory, reading logic puzzles like they were bedtime stories. Harry stepped closer and scanned the riddle. His brain tried to panic. Harry forced it still. ISA ring. Stillness. Restraint. He read. He reasoned. He chose the smallest bottle, the one that would let him go forward. He drank. It tasted like cold river water. The fire ahead turned into mere heat haze, letting him step through. And then he was in the final chamber. The air changed. It wasn't castle air anymore. It felt older. There was a man at the far end. Professor Quirrell stood near a raised pedestal. On the pedestal sat a mirror tall, gold-framed. The mirror of Ariste. Harry's stomach twisted. Quirrell turned, smiling too calmly. "Harry Potter," Quirrell said softly. Harry's scar flared. The ISA ring chilled against his finger. Quirrell's eyes flicked to Harry's hand. "Ah," he murmured, "you're wearing restraints." Harry's breath hitched. Quirrell stepped closer, voice gentle like a teacher explaining something to a child. "You have been very inconvenient," Quirrell said. Harry's wand was in his hand before he realized he'd drawn it. Quirrell didn't seem worried. "Ah, wandkraft, kirel siged, amused." Such a small language. Harry's chest tightened. "Where is it?" Quirrell smiled wider. "The stone?" he asked sweetly. "Right here, in the room, in plain sight." Harry's gaze darted to the pedestal. There was no stone. Quirrell's smile didn't falter. "You see," Quirrell whispered, "the protections here are clever. They require the thief to want the stone for themselves, and the finder to want it without using it." Harry's heart pounded. Quirrell's eyes brightened with something hungry. "And you? Harry, you want to stop me. You do not want the stone." Harry swallowed. Quirrell stepped closer, voice dropping. "So the mirror will give it to you." Harry's blood ran cold. Because the mirror of Ariste wasn't just showing desire. It was being used as a mechanism. A rule. A contract. And suddenly Harry understood why the trapdoor lattice had hummed at his presence. The protections weren't just wards. There were tests written in old law designed to funnel the right person to the right place. And Harry Potter. Harry Potter was the right person. Quirrell's eyes gleamed. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered. "The rules welcoming you, drafting you." Harry's throat went dry. "Step to the mirror," Quirrell said softly, "and give me the stone." Harry stared at him, heart hammering. The knot in his chest tightened painfully, like it was being squeezed by invisible fingers. He didn't want to, but the protections, the air, the room, the very structure of the test felt like it was leaning toward him, saying, "Do your part. Complete the clause." Harry took a step forward toward the mirror, and the world, quietly, held its breath to see what he would write into it. Quirrell's voice was soft, almost kind, like he was about to offer Harry extra credit. "Step to the mirror," he said, and give me the stone. Harry's feet moved before he fully decided to move. Not because he wanted to obey, because the rules pulled at him like gravity. Like the whole obstacle course had been written to end with Harry Potter stands here. Harry approached the mirror of Ariste. His reflection appeared instantly. But it wasn't him alone. He saw his parents again, Lily smiling, James laughing, their hands on his shoulders as if he were still small enough to be held. Harry's throat tightened. Then the mirror shifted. The branch shadow of a vast tree ghosted behind them. A raven perched above, watching. And that one-eyed figure half seen, half refused by the mirror stood just outside the frame like a law the mirror didn't want to admit it knew. Harry's chest not tightened hard. Quirrell's breath hitched behind him. Yes, he whispered. Yes, you see it. You feel it. Harry forced himself not to look back. Because if he looked back, he'd make it real. And names were hooks. He stared at his reflection and thought as cleanly as he could. I want the stone. Not TUSE.T. Oh, stop him from getting it. The mirror shimmered, and Harry felt it cold and sudden like something sliding into the world the way a coin slides into a pocket. His pocket grew heavier. Harry's heart slammed. The stone was with him. Not in the mirror. Not on the pedestal. In his possession. The protections had completed their claws. Quirrell didn't see it happen, but he sensed it. His eyes sharpened like a predator smelling blood. Give it to me, Quirrell said, the softness cracking. Now. Harry's fingers curled around his wand. No. Quirrell blinked, almost surprised. Then he sighed tired, annoyed, like Harry had failed a simple test. You don't understand, Quirrell said. He's with me. He always has been. Harry's scar flared hot. The ISA ring chilled against his finger like a warning snap. Quirrell's hands rose, and Harry moved first. Expelliarmus. The spell shot from Harry's wand. Quirrell's wand flew, and then stopped midair, caught by an invisible grip. Quirrell smiled. That's adorable, he murmured, and the wand snapped back into his hand like it had never left. Quirrell flicked his wand lazily. Ropes lashed out. Harry dove, rolling hard on stone, shoulder cracking into the floor. Pain shot up his arm. He scrambled up, breath ragged. Quirrell's eyes gleamed. Where is it? Harry didn't answer. Quirrell's voice went colder. Don't be stubborn. This is bigger than you. Harry swallowed blood taste and forced his voice steady. Everything is always bigger than me. Quirrell paused, like that hit something in him. Then Quirrell's smile returned wrong and thin. No, Kirel whispered. Not bigger. Older. The torches flickered. The air thickened. And the voice that came next didn't belong to Quirrell at all. It slid into the room like smoke finding cracks. Give it to me, Harry. Harry froze. Not because the voice was loud. Because it felt like the voice knew the shape of his scar from the inside. His skin crawled. Quirrell's hands rose to his head. Shaking then, he began to unwrap his turban. Harry's stomach turned. He didn't want to see it. He saw it anyway. A face on the back of Quirrell's head pale, flat, eyes too red, mouth too thin. A thing pretending to be a man. The thing smiled. There you are. It whispered. Harry's chest not yanked hard, like it wanted to recoil. Then the thing's gaze slid not to Harry's wand, but to Harry's right hand. To the ISA ring. To the pocket where the stone sat. Ah, the thing breathed. You carry old law. Harry's throat went dry. Quirrell's body trembled under the strain of holding that presence. But the thing only smiled wider. You can right the world, can't you? It whispered, be useful. Be mine. A cold pressure pushed into Harry's bones, trying to make him agree. Not by force. By temptation. A bargain offered like a sweet. Harry felt at the shape of an oath trying to form in the air, begging him to speak. Say yes and live. Say yes and save your friends. Say yes and become owned. Harry's hand shook. He remembered the dream. Speak and it will hold. Refuse, and you stay only a boy. Harry swallowed hard. Then he whispered, not to Voldemort, not to the mirror. To himself. I'm not a contract. The knot in his chest tightened, then steadied. ISA ring. Stillness. Harry planted his feet. No, he said clearly out loud. The thing blinked, offended by the concept of refusal. Quirrell lurched forward, wand raised. Kill him, the thing hissed. Quirrell's wand snapped up. And Harry moved. Not with a spell. With intent. With the cleanest truth he had. Harry shoved his hand into his pocket, grabbed the ash disc, and pressed it hard to his own chest through his robes. All Jai's. Protection. But he didn't command the world this time. He didn't write a new rule. He did something babbling hadn't said out loud, but Harry had started to understand. Sometimes the safest runic magic wasn't creating law. It was calling an existing law to stand up. Harry's voice came out raw. My mother paid, he said, not you. The air tightened like a clenched fist. Quirrell's spell hit. And bent. Not stopped completely, but deflected, slipping off Harry like a blade skidding off armor. Harry staggered, still hit by the force but not cut in half. The cost slammed into him, immediately head spinning, hollow ache deepening, vision wobbling. But he stayed standing. The thing on Quirrell's head snarled. What did you do? Harry didn't answer. He lunged. Straight at Quirrell. Because wandcraft was small language, sure. But touch was older. Quirrell recoiled instinctively, like even his body knew something was wrong. Harry's hands slammed onto Quirrell's arms. And Quirrell screamed. It wasn't a dramatic villain scream. It was a human scream. A sound of skin burning. Quirrell's arms blistered under Harry's grip like the flesh was rejecting him. Harry's scar flared hot, then cold, then hot again. The thing on the back of Quirrell's head shrieked, furious and panicked. Get away. Harry held on. Not because he was brave. Because he was angry in a quiet, stubborn way. Because for once in his life, something that tried to own him had found a boundary that held. Quirrell thrashed, trying to pull free. Harry's arms shook. His vision blurred. The hollow ache under his ribs widened like a crack. He felt his magic bleeding out in invisible threads. He could not keep this up. He knew it. The thing knew it too. Stop, the thing hissed. You'll die. Harry's voice came out hoarse. Better than being yours. Quirrell's skin cracked and burned under Harry's hands. Smoke rose. The thing on Quirrell's head shrieked again, high and hateful. And then Quirrell collapsed, body jerking like a puppet with cut strings. Harry stumbled back, breathing hard. The stone in his pocket felt like a weight trying to drag him into the floor. The mirror shimmered behind him, silent and watching. The thing's eyes, those red, furious eyes, locked onto Harry. And Harry felt it. Not a spell. A reach. A hook trying to sink into his scar. Trying to find purchase in the knot in his chest. Harry's whole body went cold. Then, a presence filled the room like sunrise breaking through storm cloud. Warm. Ancient. Not gentle, but real. A voice spoke behind Harry. Harry. Dumbledore. The hook snapped back like it had touched fire. The thing on Quirrell's head hissed. Dumbledore raised his wand, calm as a man closing a book. Light snapped through the chamber. The air turned hard. The thing screamed an awful sound, not human at all, and then it tore itself free, ripping out of Quirrell like smoke fleeing a burning house. It shot toward Harry. Harry's scar flared. And then the presence around Dumbledore surged, and the thing veered away, slamming into the ceiling like a bat in panic. It streaked out through cracks in the stone and vanished. Silence dropped. Harry swayed. The ash disc in his fist went cold. The ISA ring felt heavy as iron. Dumbledore was suddenly in front of him, hands steadying him. Harry, Dumbledore said softly, and for once there was no twinkle. You did very well. Harry tried to speak. His throat closed. His knees buckled, and the world went dark. Aftermath. What Dumbledore doesn't say. Harry woke in the hospital wing to the smell of clean sheets and potions. Madame Pomfrey fussed at him like she wanted to personally fight death for touching her patient. You, she snapped, are not allowed to do anything dangerous ever again. Harry croaked, sorry. Pomfrey narrowed her eyes. Don't apologize. Rest. She marched away like she could enforce that command through sheer will. Harry turned his head. Dumbledore sat beside his bed, hands folded, looking quietly tired. Harry's voice came out small. Ron and Hermione? Dumbledore smiled faintly. Recovering. Mr. Weasley will have a headache and a heroic story for the rest of his life. Miss Granger is currently arguing with Madame Pomfrey about whether a hospital wing should have a better reference section. Harry exhaled, relief shaking through him. Then his chest tightened. The stone. Dumbledore's eyes softened. Safe. Harry swallowed. Quirrell. Dead, Dumbledore said gently, and Harry flinched. Not because you wished it, because he chose a path that did not allow him to survive. Harry stared at the blanket. The thing had said I carry old law. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Then he said carefully, it was perceptive. Harry's fingers tightened on a sheet. Snape said names are hooks. Dumbledore nodded. Snape is correct. Harry hesitated, then whispered, Why do I dream of a raven? Dumbledore's gaze sharpened in a subtle way. Not fear. Respect. There are many ravens in many stories, Dumbledore said softly. And some stories reach across worlds. Harry's throat went dry. Am I his? Dumbledore didn't answer the way Harry wanted. Instead, he leaned forward, voice warm but firm. Harry, he said, you are yours. Harry's eyes stung. But the runes. The runes are part of you, Dumbledore said. Not permission for others to claim you. Harry swallowed. It costs. Every time. Dumbledore's eyes softened. Yes. Harry whispered, I don't want to become a contract. Dumbledore's hand settled on the blanket near Harry's, not touching, but close. Then do what you did in that chamber, Dumbledore said quietly. Use power without surrendering yourself to it. Harry stared at him. How? Dumbledore smiled faintly. By choosing the cleanest reason. Protection. Love. Refusal. Harry's scar prickled faintly just once like the world acknowledged the word refusal. Dumbledore rose. Now rest. The end of your feast will arrive whether you are ready or not. Harry managed a week, okay. Dumbledore paused at the curtain, glancing back. And Harry? Harry looked up. Dumbledore's eyes were steady. If you ever feel the temptation to write an oath into the world, tell someone. Harry nodded once. Dumbledore left. The sign that doesn't ask permission. That night, Harry slept. Not the deep, blank sleep of exhaustion. A sharper sleep like his mind walked into the dream on purpose. He stood again beneath the vast tree. Branches arched overhead like roads into the stars. The raven was there, silver-eye bright. And the one-eyed figure stood closer than ever. Harry's chest, not tightened, then steadied under the remembered weight of ISA. He didn't bow. He didn't run. He just stood. The figure lifted a hand. No command, no demand, just an open palm. In it lay a single runestone simple, pale, carved clean. Harry didn't touch it. He asked, voice steady, what is it? The meaning came like thunder that didn't shake the ground. Athala, heritage, home that follows the blood. Harry swallowed. Are you claiming me? The raven clicked its beak, once sharp. The figures won. I watched him like a test. And the meaning that came next was quiet, almost amused. I do not claim what is already mine. I acknowledge. The world will try to write you. S. O learn to write yourself. Harry's throat tightened. I don't want to leave. The figure's gaze flicked upward, toward the branches, toward 1,000 possible paths. Then do not. Choice is the first law. Harry's chest loosened just a fraction. He looked at the rune stone again. It wasn't a chain. It wasn't an oath. It was an offering. Harry reached out slowly and took it. The stone warmed in his palm, like sunlight on winter skin. And for the first time, the knot in his chest didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a door he owned the key to. Harry woke in the hospital wing with his heart pounding. His hand was open on the blanket. Something lay there. A small pale stone, carved with a rune. Harry stared at it, breath caught. Because Hogwarts was full of magic. But Hogwarts was not full of things that crossed from dreams into bedsheets. Outside the window, dawn light spilled over the castle. And on the sill, watching with a calm silver eye, a raven perched, still as stone, waiting, not for an oath, for a choice.